in our municipal code. Throughout this whole process, all these types of projects are undergoing a CEQA review. And ultimately, once the CEQA review has been completed, staff review has been completed, and this one study session has been completed, the application can the city, and the director can render a decision on the project. For this application, this version of this application, this project came in August earlier this year. The staff review process is still ongoing, and today's obviously is the study session that we were just talking about. Following the completion of staff's review and the CEQA document for the application, the director would be rendering a decision on this project, which we're hoping to be able to do either before the end of the year or early January. During this entire time, public comments are accepted, obviously, during the hearing and outside of the hearing through email or voicemail or phone calls, which could be directed to myself. A little bit of background on this sort of overarching development pattern that's occurring within this block of El Camino Real between Matador Avenue and Page Mill Road. In December of 2023, the City Council adopted the El Camino Real Focus Area Standards, which modified significantly many of the base development standards that were allowed for certain districts within this area that you can see on the map on the right-hand side of the screen. It modified the floor area ratio, height limit, eliminated certain retail preservation requirements, and modified parking, lot coverage, and open space requirements as well. In addition to that, it modified a number of objective design standards, specifically for this project, or that would specifically apply to this project, is where the upper story step back occurs on the El Camino Real frontage, which starts at 55 feet instead of within 2 vertical feet of the adjacent height of the building. And it also eliminated for projects within the El Camino Real focus area the requirement to have a diversity of housing types. What you see here is just an aerial image of where the project generally is located within the city. To the right-hand side, you can see the Palo Alto Square over here. To the left-hand side is a project that had been reviewed by the Architecture Review Board at 3300 El Camino Real. That project hasn't come forward yet, but there's pending a submittal for revision to that application, as well as some future housing proposed on the site. But in general, all of the all the properties are zoned the same. For this area, which is CS, or for this combined parcel, which is the CS zoning. It is at the entrance to the Stanford Research Park, which you can see sort of in the background of the top side of the image over here. And it's surrounded by various office buildings, hotels along the same side of the street, and across the street, various commercial uses. To give a high-level overview of the application, this proposed application will demolish the existing McDonald's building and the various fish market buildings that are on the site. It is proposing a 4.0 floor area, 64% lot coverage, and an 85-foot tall structure, and on average about 1.24 parking spaces per unit, where a requirement is just 1 per unit in the El Camino Real focus area. It is proposing to construct 368 units of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom sizes. There are 74 units that are going to be deed restricted to 50 to 80% AMI. This is also a requirement of the El Camino Real focus area that projects developed within this area have to provide 20% of their project as BMR units at the low income range. There's also a vesting tentative map to merge the parcels together. In general, the application is proposing a 7-story building with a 6-floor terrace. Then there are 3 larger outdoor amenity areas at the ground floor level. And as we noted before, the project does comply, and in the packet, the project does comply with the objective design standards. Here's an overview of the site plan. It's the top side of the image would be El Camino Real, but effectively this is a right turn in, right turn out access to the site, where you'd enter along the driveway and drive down to the below grade parking garage. You can see here the center courtyards that I'd noted before, and along the outer rim of the project, there is a dog run area, but a large landscape area for people to walk between. Here on the screen, you can see the El Camino Real frontage. This is the top image of the screen here, and you can see along this left-hand side, you have the Hotel Parmani. This being the back side of the image, the back side of the building. Hotel Parmani, again, you can see that in scale and reference adjacent to the project. Here you have the east elevation, and that this is facing directly towards the Parmani Hotel. So as you are walking north on El Camino towards the project, this is the face of the building that you would be seeing. And then this is what you'd be seeing if you were walking south on El Camino from Palo Alto Square. Here you can see, as well as in the plan set for the application, the various materials that are being used. There are also materials up there at the desk for you to look through, which gives you some better sense of the wood grain fiber cement panel, the metal panels that they're intending to use for the project, as well as the stone veneer that they're looking to use for the application. Some key considerations for it, as we've been talking about so far, this is a streamlined housing development application. So this is something that the city is trying to process in a more expeditious manner. Staff has done the analysis to identify where the project does conform with the base zoning standards, as has been modified by the focus area, as well as the objective design standards, again, as they've been modified by the focus area. And currently the application is being, CEQA exemption for the 15183 infill exemption is being prepared for the application. And two alternative projects had been previously submitted to the city. Both of them were a 380 unit project, one following underneath the density bonus standards, and the other being an application that was for a builder's remedy. These two projects were filed early in 2023, and between then and now, staff and the applicant have been in a lot of correspondence communication on trying to develop a project that does meet the city's objective design standards, our base zoning standards, as well as the El Camino Real focus standards. And that's the project that's being considered today, is this one that is complying with all of the standards. But it is important to note that there are two other projects that are still on the books, are still with the city, that those projects could in the future be reactivated if this project doesn't go forward. And lastly, as Chair Rosenberg had noted, the purpose of this meeting is to conduct a study session and provide feedback to the staff and the applicant about any adjustments they feel are necessary or that could improve the application or better bring it into compliance with any objective standards. That concludes my presentation. The applicant also has a presentation.
Great. Thank you very much, Garrett. Really appreciate it. I'm going to ask for if there's any questions to staff on a limited scope. So just in case there's any sort of questions directed at Garrett specifically about how this is processing through or anything like that. So really focusing more on the process of this and how this is getting permitted. If there's any questions for Garrett right now, we can take the time to ask those. Okay, none. So at this time, we'll move forward with the applicant's presentation. You'll have 10 minutes to speak. You can please approach the podium and begin when you're ready.
Hi, good morning. On behalf of Acclaimed Companies, our team is pleased to present to you the 3150 El Camino Real, a 368 unit housing development adjacent to Palo Alto Square.
And sorry to interrupt, if you don't mind stating and spelling your name for the record.
Oh, my name is Gary Johnson. Do you want me to spell my name?
Yes, please.
Oh, Gary, last name Johnson, Johnsson.
Great. Thank you very much. Please continue.
Sure. And given the breadth and complexity of this project, I would like to request an additional 5 minutes to our presentation, if at all possible.
We do typically limit to 10 minutes. You will have an additional item, an additional amount of time after there's public speakers. So you will have some time later in the event to be able to finish up if you've got any final comments.
Great. This unique project has been designed for how people want to live today, close to transit, near work, and within an authentic community. The apartment homes will be available to lease by all members of our community. From the original application submission in December of 2022 through today, this project was previously a builder's remedy project, but we elected to change course and pursue a project that complies with the El Camino Real focus area. It's the culmination of 2 years of collaborative work between our design team and Palo Alto planning staff. And we want to make sure that we recognize and appreciate the city's partnership in achieving this milestone. Our design team is a collective of some of the best designers, architects, and engineers on the West Coast. I'll now hand the time over to Chris Lee from Studio T Square and Paul Lettieri from the Gazzardo Partnership.
Thank you. Good morning. If you could also kindly state and spell your name for the record.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Chris Lee, architect of Studio T Square. My name is spelled CHRISLEE. The site context, you can see there are 2 commercial building and underutilized parking lot, already explained earlier. Next, please. From this map, we can see the pink area is El Camino Real focus area, and the project is fully complied to 3 layers of the zoning requirement. The first is base district, CS, and second, we fully comply to objective design standard as well as El Camino Real focus area zoning. Next. The projects tend to provide a multifamily housing with active interface with public realm. So the first design task, we'd like to identify 3 urban open space on either end of the block, and also we provide a large mid-block open space. And the second step, we associate with all the community amenity to open to those 3 public 3 plazas to activate the street. Next, please. From the street rendering, you can see the transparency of those amenity space help to activate the street and provide a safe and walkable street for pedestrian and biker along. Next, please. Aerial view, you can see the nice backdrop of the hillside, provide very nice view for all around the perimeter. Next, please. On the ground level, notably, when we turn into the project from Page Mill into El Camino Real, the first impression of the project are the growth of redwood tree at the corner. So your first impression before turning to the driveway are those nice redwood tree we preserve on site. And when we turn into the driveway on the left side, we allocate off-street loading and drop-off area. That area will be screened by a series of terrace and roll down decorative metal gate when it's not in use. And you can go further, go down to the basement garage. And on the street front, we have a series of amenity space connecting to the 2 courtyard, and the 2 main courtyard also connect by a 2-story breezeway. Next. When you turn into the basement garage, the guests can find a parking before the gate, and after the gate, there will be assigned parking for residents. There are 3 elevator core take residents up to the ground level. Next. Typical level shows variety of units. We have studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom, as well as 20% of them are BMR units. Next. On the top level, you can see from the El Camino Real side, we greatly recess on the top 2 level. The first to provide a large roof terrace and a 2-story high club room for the residents, and also provide a larger step back at the upper level, more than the objective design standard required. On the south side, we also have 2-story massing reduction on the left, so the sun can come into the pool deck from the south side. On the right side, we also have carved out some massing for the roof terrace and the sky lounge. Next. The upper section shows upper level step back on El Camino Real, and also on the ground level, we also step back a little bit for better public space. On the ground level, you can see the connection of 2-story breezeway connecting courtyards. Next. The rendering shows the corner plaza, the artwork, furniture, and landscape to activate the street. Next. Elevation, we work very close with planning department to make sure we comply to every item in the objective design standard. From here, you can see we break up the massing by a big to 2 major break and also a series of small break, as the diagram shows the red vertical break, and also on the lower diagram shows the upper level step back. We provide those diagrams to provide the quantified distance and area that we comply to each of the items. Next. The south side, because we're facing the 2-story adjacent building, so we step back from the 2nd level up. We also provide a vertical break every 50 feet, as well as projection balconies every 40 feet. Next. This is the west side elevation facing the Palo Alto Square. Next. The east elevation facing Palmari Hotel. I think it's not difficult to check box all the objective design standard. I think we strive to provide a coherent elevation building design that when we turn the corner, it's still well proportioned. We don't want to just follow the rule. We want to provide a nice design and as a holistic design. Next. The material we use warm and welcoming material, so we hope the building has a warm and welcoming gesture for the community. So the main body will be a wood grain rain screen, and then the base will have a cultural stone and some metal panel at the top level. And we also use a lot of shading device and the canopy to accentuate the elevation to provide more interest on the facade. The next will be introduced by landscape architect. Thank you.
40 seconds.
Thank you. And please
Good
name and spell your
morning.
name
Yes,
for the
I will do
record.
that. I'm Paul Lettieri with the Gazzardo Partnership, Letttieri. Happy to see you this morning. So I only have 3 slides, so it'll be quick. The public realm along El Camino Real was a significant part of the design for us, and we provided an 8-foot clear walking zone along there. It's much wider in most places, but that's the minimum that it gets to. We've also taken some of the angular paving ideas that are part of the design of the project and brought them out into the public realm portion of the project to try to integrate it with it. We've preserved all 5 street trees that are out there, the existing street trees, and added 8 more. So we've got a pretty good collection of street trees along the El Camino frontage. We've emphasized the main lobby entry and created a sort of a dynamic seating element that takes you past the art and water feature that will be integrated into the building column as the design progresses. The central plaza in the middle of the El Camino facade is conceived as really an indoor-outdoor space, so that there's there's workspace inside that can be utilized outdoors as well, and it's defined by planters and seating elements as well, and lighting. There's a continuous walkway that goes around the entire site that allows folks to do that perimeter walk. There's a pet relief area on the lower left corner of the site plan that's part of that walkway. All of the utilities that are on the ground are well screened by elegant fence design. There's one in the upper right corner and also at the lower left corner where transformers are located. And when we get to the podiums, which are also shown there, I'm a little over now. There's 3 major spaces that define the podiums. There's an active pool and spa area. There's a quieter Zen space, which has a quiet spa, exercise area, bamboo grove, and a water feature. Excuse me. The central breezeway is more than just a breezeway connection. We perceive that as a real active community center. It'll have barbecues in it, cooking spaces, a linear fire feature, extensive furnishings and lighting, and nice materials in it as well.
We ask
And I
that
think
you
if we can go to the
finalize
roof-
your comments.
I'm doing that now. Go to the
Appreciate
next
it.
one, please. The roof decks. The roof decks take advantage of these fabulous views. We've got barbecues on all of those as well, and also an additional pet relief station. And the last slide shows some of the materials, fencing. You can see them. I won't go through them all. I don't have time for that now. But as a final note, we've integrated stormwater treatment into the design, and by using silva cells, bioretention, and we've also achieved approximately 85% native plantings on the site. So with that, I will stop.
Thank you very much. We understand that this is a short amount of time to present a project of this scope, but you will have a little bit more time to speak in a little bit. All right, thank you very much for the to the applicant for the presentation. At this time, questions to the applicant will be held until after public comments and after rebuttal. So we'll move forward to public comment. So any public speaker cards, we get 3 minutes per person. And again, 15 minutes for a group. If anyone has any public comment, this time, Veronica, raised hands or speaker cards.
Yes, I have 1 speaker card and 1 raised hand.
Perfect.
First in-person speakers from Steve Levy.
If you don't mind, please state and spell your name for the record, Mr. Levy.
Hi, my name is Steve Levy, Steve Levy. I speak as a 50-plus year resident, but also as an economist who works professionally with regional planning agencies on growth and housing. As a resident, I'm hopeful that Jonathan and Garrett will be able to speedily approve the project. This is very exciting. But I want to talk professionally about the two important pieces that bring this project to this point. One is what Garrett and the applicant and Chair Rosenberg have already said, that we're here because of extensive direct engagement. Direct engagement relative to the El Camino focus area that produced all of the changes in zoning and development standards that Garrett presented, but also intense engagement with the applicant over a period of time to come to a solution to move beyond a builder's remedy to a compliant project. I'm hopeful that that engagement will continue. It's going to, on the retail committee, they're going to engage with the stakeholders about filling the vacant spaces. The second important point, which you all discussed at the last meeting with the HIP, is the recognition that financial feasibility is critical for projects to come forward. And I was very happy with the discussion at the last ARB meeting. To be clear, financial feasibility, to me, to an economist, doesn't mean that you have to accept whatever the applicant first proposes. Often that will have usually some intense room for negotiation, and that's what happened here. But the other part of financial feasibility is if it doesn't pencil out or make sense to the applicant, that project will not come forward. We're at a point in the housing element, which is why this day is so exciting, that we're bringing forth finally some projects that will help us meet our goals and our goals for low-income residents. So I'm hopeful as financial feasibility comes up both for this project and in the ARB's work going forward, that you remember in the end, the applicant needs to be satisfied after negotiation that the project will make sense for him, her, or their organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levy. Appreciate your comments. Next public speaker.
Yes, there's actually two raised hands on Zoom. First is from Amy Ashton.
Ms. Ashton, if you could kindly state and spell your name for the record. Is she there?
Yes, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
All right, we seem to either be having some technical difficulties. Perhaps we could move on to the next public speaker and circle back.
Okay, we'll come back. Next is Rigo Gallardo.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, if you could kindly state and spell your name for the record, please.
My name is Rigo Gallardo, spelled first name R-I-G-O, last name G-A-L-L-A-R-D-O. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Like I said, my name is Rigo Gallardo. I'm a field representative for the North Car Carpenters Union, Local 405 here in the South Bay. And I'm here to discuss the proposed residential development at 3150 El Camino Real. This project has potential to be a fantastic addition to Palo Alto, bringing 368 new residential units that could help meet our community's growing needs. However, this project will only succeed if it is built by a responsible contractor who prioritizes responsible labor standards such as hiring apprentices from an accredited apprenticeship program and making sure the workforce has health care. A project of this scale should not be left to contractors who might cut corners, exploit workers, or rely on low road subcontractors. Palo Alto deserves better than that. Our community safety, workforce integrity, and the quality of the project are at stake here. I urge the acclaimed companies to make a choice that reflects the real commitment to Palo Alto by supporting responsible construction practices and good, stable jobs. Let's do what's right for the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gallardo. Can we try and circle back to Ms. Ashton, see if she's able to speak?
Yes, Amy Ashton.
All right, shall we try again? Good morning.
There we go. If you could kindly state and spell your name for the record. Thank you.
Fantastic. My name's Amy Ashton, AMIEASHTON, and I'm Executive Director of Palo Alto Forward. We submitted a letter as an organization, and I'm here as a voice of support for this project. In particular, as Steve mentioned, we want to applaud the collaborative process between the planning department and the applicant. This project brings more units than have been approved in all of 2024 so far. It's a huge victory and acknowledges the findings of the recent fiscal analysis completed by the planning department. Thank you for your review and comments. We can't wait to see Palo Altans living in this beautiful new project, and we can't wait to see it approved. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other public speakers?
That's all our speakers.
Okay. At this time, the applicant will have 10 more minutes to speak. This is typically used as a rebuttal time for any of the public comments. It does appear that most of your comments were in support, but if there's anything that you feel is pertinent to add to the discussion regarding your project, you'll have 10 more minutes at this time to speak.
We don't have anything to add at this point.
Great, thank you very much. All right, at this point, we turn the questions over to the ARB, and we have questions for applicants or staff. So if anyone on the ARB has any questions for the applicant or the staff, to the applicant, you might be jumping up and down a little bit. So I would encourage you to sit in the front row just for a little bit of ease here as questions get directed your way. Not for study session. Good question.
I do have one question. This probably is for the planner. Just in terms of the side yard setback, on the report, it says 15 feet proposed, and that's, I see that on the plans as well, but balconies and I guess a little outdoor area on the first floor is within that setback. Is that compliant with city zoning requirements?
Yes, it is. There are allowances for encroachments into that area. If I remember correctly off the top of my head, that there's a 6-foot encroachment for balconies within those areas. So that is something that we did make sure to look at to ensure that it was conforming to the standards.
Thank you.
Board Member Hirsch.
Of just, discussion we had before about the Parmani Hotel, has that simply been, we've reviewed that in detail, so in the past, so it isn't shown on any drawings at height of what we had approved. So is it then being held back, that whole application?
So there's a couple points to that. The first is that unfortunately that project did expire due to the pandemic. Their financial feasibility sort of like many other projects went out the window. But so to that extent, they, in the conversations that I've been involved with them, they have hopes in the future that they may come back and propose that same design, which I think the communications we've had with them would be, if it's, a 1-for-1 comparison, we would likely try to go through a more streamlined process, given that that's had previous review from the ARB. But that's dependent on their, position and when they're able to actually come back and do that. The second thing to note is the actual standards within the objective standards talk about adjacent buildings, and it talks more about the existing context rather than the proposed context for these adjacent buildings. And so that's also why there's not a scale or a reference to that proposed project within these, within this project in terms of how they're demonstrating compliance with that standard.
complete. There's a line of trees in the back of the site. They're in relative, has there been any study of those trees? You know, are you hoping to retain them if they can be?
So I think the team with Gazzardo can talk a little bit more about what they have done. We do have within the plan set an arborist report that identifies the impacts of those trees. And I believe if I remember correctly, and like I said, they'll be able to help me answer this question too. There is going to be an impact to those trees back there. They are, I believe, looking to remove them and then replace them. So that would be that would mean that they would need to replace them in accordance with our tree technical manual. And I can find the sheet in the plan set in a second and then bring that up to you all.
Would you like me to say anything about it? I can.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yes, there's a row of fairly poor condition blue gums along the backside that they're proposed to be removed for safety reasons and otherwise. And we have replacement trees shown on the plans for that as well. And it's actually on the adjacent property. So which we've worked with the adjacent property owners as well, and they share the same opinion about these trees being a potential fall risk. So that's what's going to happen with it.
Bless you.
While the landscape architect is up, can I ask a question? Thank you. So actually on the back and the sides, you have the walkway area with the gate and fencing. So how tall is that fence relative to the grade?
Which fence are you talking about?
The fence that wraps the three sides of the property on the
I think
back
it's
and the
6.
sides. 6 feet tall. And is, this might be a owner question, but there are gates on the ends of it. Is that locked in for kind of resident use only?
Yes,
With,
it's meant to be private space.
thank you.
I have, it's okay now, 3 sort of things I'd like to ask staff if I could. One is I heard you say in the presentation that there's no retail space on this project. Is that right? Nothing proposed?
That's correct.
And I see on the main floor site plan, a number of spaces that look like they could be retail, a leasing office, a club room, a co-working space. Would those be able to be retail in the future if the applicant wanted to convert them to that purpose?
In general, they could be. There is excess parking provided on the site in comparison to the base standards and the El Camino Real focus standards. But in general, the focus area does not require retail preservation requirements be upheld. But if in the future they came in and they wanted to turn the fitness area into a commercial space or commercial gym, right, rather than just one that's used by the tenants, presumably the first things that come to me in my mind as a planner is how is parking resolved, which is why I was saying earlier that at least from a parking perspective, that may be more feasible to do.
Would it be possible to condition the building now so that it could be retail without them having to go through a planning approval process?
I don't think that they need to go through a planning review process to put in that business, provided that they're able to demonstrate their compliance with the parking requirements for the site. But it would be a good question to ask the applicant. I don't think that their vision with the application is to have a commercial space within this area or within the building, excuse me.
Okay, I was just trying to find a way to give them that option in the future without having to decide to go through the process, because that's likely a deterrent. So we can come back to that, I guess.
And as they're so sort of centrally located to some pretty significant hubs of transportation, public transportation, whether that parking requirement would be as necessary.
Yeah. Well, if we were to, as a board, recommend that you condition this so those spaces could be retail in the future without receiving additional approvals, would that be possible? If you do the parking analysis now and decide that it fits the requirements, just to make it easier for them if they decide to do that in the future?
From a process standpoint, they at a minimum would need to come to the building department and get building
course.
permits, right, for that, which means a use and occupancy permit. That's typically how we would analyze how the project can comply with those standards. So there, when I was saying there wouldn't be sort of an additional process, what I should have clarified to say is there, in my mind, initially wouldn't be an additional planning review immediately necessary just to move a tenant into that space, provided that they can demonstrate compliance with those requirements. So having a condition on the project or not wouldn't necessarily preclude them from being able to do that in the future.
Okay, thank you. My second question, this is
Can
for
I
you,
ask a
Garrett.
follow-up question on the
Sure,
retail?
sure.
So say in the future, if it turn out to be retail space and open to the public, is it allowed to have, like, say, TI, the tenant improvement, to add more floor area? Since the floor height is 20 feet, it is possible to have 2 stories there and adding floor areas for the whole building. Then how will it be affected?
Hi, Stephen. Sorry. The big issue in that scenario would be if they're creating a second floor level, we would need to evaluate how that FAR is increasing for the site. Given that they're pretty close to the maximum limit right now, it would be a little bit more of a challenge. There may be a small amount they could add to it. I believe that there is a mezzanine floor already built into that space, but if they were expanding that mezzanine further, that's where we would need to look at that to see, how is it compared to this maximum 4.0 ratio. But again, I think that's something, if the only work that's happening is internal to the building, I think that might be something, even if it needed a planning review to sort of document the increase in floor area change and charge impact fees associated to that, it would be something we could do fairly simply.
Okay, thank you.
Now it works.
Couple questions. Architectural question on the lobby circulation to the rest of the building. In particular, is there any reason why the corridor that is between the other facilities there in the blue purple color, why isn't there a corridor through to the south side of the building at that location rather than, or can you explain how that circulation would work between the lobby and the units in the distant areas?
In between 2 lobby, how do they connect?
Well, no, to the units themselves. How do you get to, how do you circulate all the units there? Because you have the lobby and a circulation corridor that goes to the north side of the building. And there's really only connection that you're showing on this level. The first level is through the courtyard to get to any of the other units there. Or going around the whole outside of the building to the
Right now,
south
we
lobby.
are working with interior designer. Actually, those walls between, for example, between the lobby and leasing office, it will be much more transparent right now. It will be probably a serious glass wall and fully open. So they can go through from lobby to leasing to co-working to fitness very easily. I think we didn't show the doors there necessarily, but right now, I think interior going to fine tune that layout to make those amenity area connect more flow through much easier. So that residents, we envision that most of the east side residents will probably, if they go on the street, they will use the east side lobby. So we have 2 lobby. They can go to the east side lobby or west side lobby. And somewhere in between, they can also spill out to the street from the co-working space and the fitness that mid-block plaza.
Just, it's confusing as to how that would really work. Now, let's say that somebody's coming to pick up their mail. They go into the north lobby
Okay.
for that. Then what? They go back outside, around the building, to the south side to go through that smaller lobby? Or can they simply, as you were seeming to indicate here, could they continue straight through that corridor, sort of semi-corridor, it's still in the blue color there, to get through to the whole of the south side of the building?
Mhm.
On the screen, we're sort of highlighting the mail area in the red. And I believe, David, if I'm understanding your comments correctly, that, you know, some sort of passage between this main lobby and the remaining corridor is seeming to be needed. And it looks like you could, in theory, go through the club room and out that door. And I guess that's the question, is what's the intent of how that's going to be?
And is it possible to make a connection, a direct connection from the inside of the building without going to either to the pool area, that you would simply go straight through the co-working area and between the, actually the,
Then we can study the flow with interior designer, see if there's any improvement can achieve that. Yeah, definitely.
it seems to be, that your typical floor is simple, direct and clear. And this floor is not, and there, you could, it seems to me, it could be significantly improved if you just continue. You have a double door from that corridor there leading out to the lobby, the north lobby.
Mhm.
So it would seem that you could make a connection, a direct connection.
Mhm.
I think the same applies to kind of going through, if I can find my pen here as well, because you have elevators down the page to the units on the page south.
Yes.
Real,
Hmm.
which you have a bridge on all the other floors. You have these elevators right there. If somebody lives here but on the fourth floor, or here, after you get your package, you are kind of going all the way around in this option, like even if it's outside through the breezeway and back in,
Exactly.
I think
yeah.
that would be a much more, nicer way to connect than the rabbit warren of hallways.
You were already indicating that you're suggesting a openness to this center spaces, these rather nicely, exciting kind of interior space where you then look up and see the sky from there. But if on your typical floor, you have that, if you looked at that floor, you have that corridor running through, and on this floor, you could very well make a connection, split the two back-to-back residences and go straight, well, actually there are four of them, and then go straight to the other elevator bank to make that a complete circulation as well.
My recollection, I need to go back to check my recollections. We had the option earlier, but the exiting of the dead end corridor prevent us to do so. So I need to double check with my team. I believe we had the option to go through the breezeway at the very beginning, but the building code prevent us by doing so. So we need to terminate the dead end corridor in certain distance.
With a fireproof door,
But I think that's a good
perhaps.
comment. We would
Yeah.
continue to explore that.
It would look to improve. I'm looking, I think we're both looking to improve the circulation on this particular floor by sort of following the concept you use on a typical floor.
Did you have other questions, David?
I do, but yes, I have one other, one other one concerning the balconies. Some of these balconies are very close to each other. I think that what the objective standards was looking for was to create a balcony within that distance, and then the next 20 feet would be the next area for another balcony. Some of these balconies are 4 or 5 feet from each other. So do you think that's a reasonable idea, or perhaps you could alternate the balconies rather than have them that close to each other?
Yeah, we actually did alternate. Otherwise, you will see, like, for example, each unit had 2 windows, then you will see the balcony just go by the same distance. I think that's not the aesthetic we want to go with. So sometimes we flip the balcony. That's why some of them are closer, but I don't think people would jump to. I think we
Well, I'm not
keep
looking for them
some
to jump.
distance. Yeah, it's still safe to have. But I think elevation wise, they would look better not to repeat every 20 feet. I think that would be not a good elevation design, in my opinion.
Well, I'm sort of wondering what sort of sense of privacy do you have if somebody's balcony is that close? Some of them are really quite close.
David, if I can jump in here on the similar note, looking at floor level 3, on that south side facade, it does look like those balconies are all sort of touching. What's the intent for the privacy screening between those? Yeah, there we go, right there. So this area here, all of those. Thank
Yes, you see
Yeah.
how close they are?
See, those are all touching, right? And then additionally, these 2 are kind of small, and then these ones here are quite close. So just a little bit more explanation on that, I think would be appreciated.
I think the level 3 is different because we provide, from level 3, we have a second level step back. So that specific level has a larger balcony. We can put planter in between them, so to have some privacy. The actual typical level is on, you can see the next level, level 7. That would be the typical balcony, which is more separate. I think they have a good 10-foot distance in between them.
Okay, but on this level right here, right, looking, oh, go back if you don't mind, Garrett. Okay, so at any one of these partitions, you're saying a planter, would there be a full height wall? Would it be 8 feet, 6 feet? What's the goal of the separation there? Or is it really just a 42-inch high railing and a planter?
I think we can also incorporate some glass wall between them.
Okay.
I think you haven't gone to that detail yet, perhaps, and so this is a kind of a suggestion that you look at all of them relative to each other and see if you can find them some good schemes for creating privacy.
Kind of related to balconies, one other follow-up question. Seems like most units have balconies, but not all of them, right? So what's the percentage that have balconies versus not?
I do not have the number right here, but I believe we try to have, other than the studio, most of the 1-bedroom to 3-bedroom, we'd like to have balcony for each unit, unless there's some circumstance for, we want to create some special element. So we try very hard, every unit should have a balcony other than the studio.
Yeah, there's some, studio size looking and others, like say on the 3rd floor, El Camino facing, there's that angled unit that does not appear to have a balcony. I just want to make sure it's not, below market units do not have balconies, so
No,
it's fully equitable.
no.
And
So
typically.
just to follow up on that, I guess, you were talking about the corner units here at the front and the left?
Yes.
On the left and the right, so there
Front
do
to
appear
the
to
left
be
and that middle.
in the middle part,
One as well.
these 2 here. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, those 2, this one as well, I don't
Right.
think has a balcony. This one here,
That's elevation purpose.
okay. And then if we can swap over to the 5th floor plan. Actually, 6th floor, I'm sorry. So here it says roof, but then are those balconies? And
No, I
Is it one
think
continuous balcony?
partial of
have
them
the same
could be
question.
balcony, but we don't want each, because that's really large step back, maybe some area we want to fence out as just a roof. Some area can be for residents.
Because
Uh,
when
we
I go
haven't-
to the section view, that this one here, one on 402, it looks like it's a balcony.
Yeah, part of the deck are balcony, but not all of them.
I see. So like, I think here. Is that the right place? Yeah. Because it looks like there's a person there.
Right.
So you're suggesting that the dotted line is balcony and the rest of it is like TPO roof or something?
Right.
And what's that railing height here?
42 inches.
Is that a person I'm seeing in that detail? It's really hard to see.
Just an outline of one.
Okay, because if it's I'm 5 feet tall, but typical scale figures, we use 5'6" or something, it just looks like, up to your eyeballs height of railing. So just want you to be careful about, like, obviously it's related to your elevation design. But what that looks like is their TPO roof right outside of your, the metal perforated railing. If you could carry that a little bit further. That's all.
Agreed. And if you could go back to that floor plan level 6, if you don't mind, Garrett, just to comment on that one roof area, I had the same sort of question as to how that's going to be handled. Yeah, A107, beautiful. Slide to the left. A little bit more. Right there, perfect. So again, here, whether that's going to be divided into 3 separate balconies or whether that's going to be a roof and those aren't actually doors, I think that just needs a little bit of clarification. And again, it's not a make or break at this point in regards to the overall project, but if you have an intent for that, we just want to clarify it and better understand it. So whether that's 3 separate balconies or whether that's just a roof and there's no doors there, I think that clarification needs to be had.
Right. I don't have my microphone. Their unit 1C looks like it could have some balcony on that roof, but it doesn't.
As it works with the elevations, with the railings, things like that. So just a little clarification, I think, across the board on balconies, heights, which ones have access and which ones don't, I think would be very useful.
I think conceptually, we'd like them to be balcony for the residents. I didn't say we want to commit it, tell you that all balcony because we still working into waterproofing detail right now. So we want to have some flexibility. If the edge, we don't want the balcony go all the way to the edge, we might have to do something to stop at the closer to the building line.
I have 2 sort of process questions for staff. They're not directly to this, but if I could go with that. Garrett, this is one of the first projects we've seen where you really put the objective standards checklist to work. I want to know how the process went for you when you were reviewing it. Were there certain standards that were more difficult to interpret, or how was the process?
Yeah, yes, that's the answer. Not coming from an architecture background, some of the things were a little harder to, I think, distill for myself. I had to read it maybe 500 times to get it. We are sort of currently envisioning, working through clarifying some of that. I know Claire is going to work to hopefully, or maybe Stephen, I forget who's going to be doing that now, but we'll be hopefully working in the next coming months to just bring something back to you guys to be able to talk about how we can distill some of that. I think it was really helpful for the communication between staff and the applicant. What we were expecting to be provided in terms of details, or at least in terms of how the design needed to be met. I think it was it was very helpful for us to be able to have that conversation and look at it together and say, this is what we think this is trying to say. And so I think it led to a lot more collaborative conversation between city and the staff and the applicant. So.
How many times did they come to you with something and you judge it didn't quite meet the standard and sort of went back and forth on it?
I would only say a couple. I mean, maybe 2 or 3 times, but I think, like I said before, it was a matter maybe more of my needing to read it again for the 50th time to say like, okay, no, this is actually what it's saying. But again, that might just be more of a personal thing.
Through the chair, can I ask the applicant the same question?
Please.
To the architect? We're trying to make these standards work. I'd like to know what your experience was following them.
Like I mentioned before, it's not too difficult to check the boxes. Some of the standard I do feel is a little bit onerous and could lead to too repetitive pattern if not careful. We try to break those pattern, but because we don't like the big building to have that repetitiveness. So we try very hard to comply to it, but at the meantime, create some more dynamic module to it. But I think that make a lot of sense. If someone not careful, those guidelines can help prevent the building to be too big a mess. And I do think, I would say 90% of them make sense. Probably one or two, we do feel like it kind of a little bit too much into the details to hold our hand too tight to do a good design.
Thank you. Did you feel it was onerous to have to prepare the studies I see in the drawings say of percentage of facade being one way or another? There's additional drawings that you wouldn't normally make. Were they overly difficult to do?
No, I think the first time a little bit difficult. I think we have another project. The second time was pretty easy. Actually help us to understand internally. I think not only Palo Alto, we have to do that. Some other city, we also have to kind of prove that we made that standard. I think as an architect, I think it's a good way to kind of safeguard the aesthetic of the building. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your opinion. Thank you to the chair for indulging me.
Yeah, I'd like to just add a little bit to that because as one of the board members here who is kind of concerned about some of the language as well early on when it was being created, I was concerned that that some of the references are really to kind of El Camino Real in the past, you know, rather than buildings coming up in the future and in fact this very building. So the references to vertical requirements seem to me to be of little importance to this particular building, and a lot more of the way in which your horizontals actually work seem to be more important to this building. So I think it's a feedback that as we get into a building of this nature, the standards should be adjusted. And so it's kind of useful in that direction as well for us to do a better set of standards.
I think one thing that I guess I'll just add to what I had mentioned before, I think for large properties like this, there's a lot of more space just to play with the putty, so to speak. For smaller sites, as you all can think of, 3265 El Camino is another one that's coming in 2 weeks for you guys. A very narrow, very small site would likely have a lot more challenges to conform with many of these standards.
I had the same type of question for staff regarding the planning process. I would just like to hear from you. How did you manage, or how did it go getting them to come off of the builder's remedy project to something that's code compliant?
I think, you know, there's a lot of there's a lot of conversations between myself and the applicant. I think fortunately we had a lot of interest from the applicant side to want to process an application that would meet our standards. And we were sort of conveniently at the same time developing these focus area standards. And so there was a lot of communication between staff, the director, the applicant on how those standards could be molded to try to encourage as most significant amount of development within this specific corridor as possible. So I think having the checklist and having, of course, the objective design standards, it makes it a little bit more simple to be able to say, you know, as Chris was mentioning, are you checking the box? Are you not checking the box? How is it an apples to apples comparison, apples to oranges? I think that made it a lot simpler in terms of just process. I think it certainly helps to be able to go to this study session rather than come to the board and ask for, possibly have to do it 2 or 3 times, depending on, I think, some of the intent statements, right, which is maybe a bit more the traditional process. I think it helps projects move through the pipeline a little bit faster.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Can I ask a few questions regarding the site plan to the applicant? So on the site plan, you notice there are several loading areas. Could you please explain the intent for that? Is it more for the management team or is for car share, food delivery, or on the site plan for the loading?
Can we see the site plan?
Bear with
I
us
think
while we
the-
bring it
yeah.
up.
If you have the paper on your.
Yeah,
I mean,
sheet
probably for the
SP
public, we should wait for
400.
the plan. Okay. We turn into the driveway, the light blue area
Mhm.
are the moving loading. I think there are two functions. One is for moving loading. We work with a traffic engineer to make sure the loading truck can turn back in and turn out safely. So those are one for moving truck. They need to schedule a time in order to go there to load. And that area is also for trash pickup. So we have two trash chute. All the trash will collect from the basement and hauled out through the ramp into that zone during only specific time, most likely very early in the morning. So the trash truck can come in front loaded and turn out as well. So that light blue area is for moving loading and trash loading. And below that, the pink hatch area is for passenger drop off. And also like Uber, Uber E delivery. There are probably two spot temporary parking for those purposes.
How about the loading area on the right side of the sheet?
That we like that to be a loading area, but public work and transportation doesn't agree because the bike lane on El Camino Rio, they feel like the back out to the street would be difficult. So we really several times to make that a secondary loading from another lobby, which we believe is a good idea. So right now, that driveway is only for the transformer surface. When transformer out of order, the surface truck can turn in and do some maintenance work. That's the only purpose.
Okay, so back to the trash staging and Uber delivery, that area, is it gated or?
Yeah, we design a decorative roll down door. So when it's not in service at night, they can fully secure. So there's no people would, doing something, anything.
So
there.
during daytime, it will be just open?
Yeah,
all
when
the time?
it's the scheduled time, the management will roll up the door
I
and,
see.
yeah.
And there is also the garage is also gated, like at the street level or?
Garage, if you go down to the basement plan, the first area is not gated. So those are for gas parking, potential tenant, they can go in and find a parking pretty easy. We do have a gate past certain point, but I think we allocate roughly 30 gas parking. And also the bike parking on the upper side can access by both gas and the residents.
So the gate showing here, it's actually doesn't exist, right? Wait.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
wants to go farther down.
This one.
Yeah, there's one on the first row, and also there's on the lower drive aisle, there's another gate. So there are two gates for this level. And when you go further down, there's another gate. The second basement are all gated.
So you
Okay.
can get these spaces here, but you've got a gate here, here, and here. So really, you're kind of limited to this zone here.
Right.
Got it.
Since we're here, I have a question about the clearance, the vertical clearance for the parking. So on section, it seems like there are a few parking spot that is only 8 feet instead of 8'2" minimum.
I think the lower level would be lower than 8'2". So all the accessible parking will be provided at the B1, the first level. And I think the B1 level, we try to make all the corner has accessible clearance 8'2" or above.
Okay, so if we open the section sheet A401, the building section B, and there, under the pool, so the residential parking, the dimension shows 8 foot high.
Yeah, so
How many parking spaces?
there will not be accessible parking. There are probably
Okay.
6 of them. If
Okay.
They are not accessible, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And back to the site plan, so I see there is elevation change at several spaces, like for the most street front spaces, leasing and fitness center, those are lower than the main lobby, right? It's
Correct.
about like 2 feet lower
Correct.
or so. So how about on the outside, like the walkway where the transition happened? I know inside the building, you show steps at certain areas, but how about for the exteriors? The walkway, the pedestrian walkway on the
On
outside?
the El Camino Real sidewalk, there's smooth transition from east to west. I think there are roughly 4 feet height differences. There are gentle slope throughout the curbside.
So you mean from this door area about here, it's just gently slope down for about over 2 feet?
Right. So you can see some of the ramp we temporarily placed there. I think right now the ramp location, we working with interior designer to kind of mitigate the visual connection to be more transparent between those functions. So the ramp might move to different area to open up in between those functions. But we do need have ramp or lift in between some of the function because they do have a high differences.
Okay, thank you. And one question regarding the entry plaza, the column, it seems like you have some features going on there. Is it like just a finish or it's some water feature around the column or?
That's the design intent. We imagine to incorporate some water feature along with the structural column and the landscape sitting area. I think that's to be further developed.
Okay, so if we go to sheet A331, the rendering of the main lobby at the west corner plaza, the column, it seems like it's semi-transparent. So what's the material of it?
You mean the column at the
Sheet
corner?
331.
Yeah, or this one also works for, yeah, for this column here.
I can maybe interject and help with it. The idea is that there's going to be an artist involved with that whole feature. So the column itself is solid. It's not a transparent column. And it would have, we're hoping we have water come down that column on with an artist involved with how the water gets to the pool at the bottom. So that's part of the whole dynamic of the entry lobby. And so it's not all worked out, but the idea is there. We have the provisions for the pool of water to be there, provisions for water to be able to come out. Does it come out at the top of the column, the middle of the column? We don't know how that'll work yet, but that's the idea.
Thank you.
Welcome.
That's my questions for now.
can I ask a couple of questions as well? So about, one is about windows. Are the windows from the apartments operable? Or any operable portions on them?
Yes, every unit would like to have a portion of operable windows.
Okay, that's not indicated on the elevations, are they?
It's not, we design as the intent has that we haven't identified which portion would be operable right now.
Okay. And also in the renderings, there's some very deep recesses on the front, which looks nice. But I'm trying to understand what, like, is that with a thickened wall, what's happening in that to create those recesses? Like, for instance, the rendering on 410.
You referring to the El Camino Real site?
Yes.
Some of the shadow is actually created by a shading device. I believe you see the kind of wood color on the wood color facade.
Mhm.
That window kind of looks really deep. We incorporate some metal shading device at the corner, so they create a extra depth for the shadow.
So the wall is not thicker and the window
is
is not
not-
sitting.
Yeah, it probably have a couple inch of 2 to 4 inch recess, but not as deep. We use the shading device to create deeper impression.
Because like right in that corner, like here, let me see if I can draw, although controls from my side is not working too well. So like here, that window looks about, a foot recessed from the face of the wood. Is that not intentional?
No, it's not the actual recess. I think it's a shading device.
Because there's a little bit of shading device that pokes out. But the window itself also looks like it's sitting inward. Like if you slide down here to the angled view, like here, that window looks like it's pretty far in and it has a pretty deep picture frame look to it. Is that not actually going to happen?
In the middle, that's a balcony. So if there's a balcony, they do have at least 6 foot recess.
Right, in
into it.
here, but I'm talking about this corner one.
Yeah, I think what Chris was noting before is that there's going to be sort of two elements. The window may be slightly recessed. He was saying about 2 to 4 inches, but there's also a projecting panel element that goes beyond the facade. So it creates something that visually looks deeper than it actually is.
Okay. 'Cause, yeah, from this render, it gives the sense of like, 18 inches, not 2 to 4 inches.
But I think the perspective, kind of the trick of what is projecting out, what is recessed, sometimes hard to tell. I just want to clarify, there's not double wall, that's a metal shading device.
Okay. Because, yeah, the ins and outs in this view looks nice and it sounds like it won't quite be achieved that way. I'll flip over to my question about balconies, just in terms of architecture and materials. So you have some glass balconies like we see right here on the screen. And the detail for that is on 411. And then you have on 412, you have the metal balconies, but the detail on the corner here still says glass, and it, like this look where the section cut is taken versus the detail is quite different. What is the actual intent? Like, will the metal actually come down to, wrap the edge of the structure?
I think we like to match them. One of them is incorporate them into some of the objective design standard when you call for a deeper recess, vertical break. We use certain type of balcony to be different than the other type. So we kind of coherently kind of bring the the purpose for recess area
Mhm.
with a different type of balcony.
Okay, because this, I would like for you to attempt to actually achieve this look with the, it sounds like clip-on balconies, where the exterior material kind of hides all of the edge structure, which the detail is not doing. This detail 5, which is on the upper left of that, the same page.
It looks like if you go, if I'm
Right.
understanding correctly, when you're looking at the details here, this material comes down to the front and then you sort of see this projection of the
Right.
meat of the plate. Whereas in the rendering, it really is, let me see if I can do this differently. Where it really is sort of, there's the meat of the balcony, but the material comes all the way to the front. So there's a little bit of discontinuity between the details and the renderings. And we're just trying to understand what the intent is. Would that be a good summary?
Yeah. Because in proportion to the overall elevation, that larger vertical that you see on the rendering is better proportioned than what this detail would result in.
Yeah, the details still being developed. I believe the rendering would be more of the design intent
Okay.
that we moving forward.
And while we're on this page, one last question, like this looks like all the water is going towards the center. Does that drain out the middle? Or does it dump out the side, like on from this little gap? Since you have stacked balconies, how do the upper balconies affect the people below?
I think the bow-down balcony would be likely shift flow, but all the internal balcony would be through internal drain.
Okay. So sheet flow out the edge, which like this balcony sheet flows out the edge, which then comes to the balcony below. Is that correct? Let's just say, let's make sure the, you know, the stacked drainage is considered, so it's
Right,
worked through.
right.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask, have you discussed with your transportation people just how you're going to stack delivery vehicles as they come in, you know, that you have an awful lot going on at that edge of the building there. And I suppose that eventually everybody learns where they have to go. But at first maybe, and now we have a conflict actually, because we have a bike path on El Camino Real that's in the planning stages as well. So that you're going to have a lot of stuff happening right here at the entry. Is this sort of in development to make it with signs indicating where smaller vehicles go, and how do you intend to do that?
Yeah, we do work with transportation several times. We have a different option on El Camino Real, which is being turned down because the bike lane. So we need to consolidate all the activity inside the driveway. So we increase that loading area quite a bit in order to accommodate all the activity will be happening there. And we also have a traffic engineer put all the template, and we also work with trash management from the city and from our own management team to put in the appropriate template to that to ensure all the loading and trash pickup can be managed there. But I think importantly, we need to management team need to also have a schedule to kind of screen all the activity as well.
How are you going to do that?
I think the trash pickup will be in the morning. So at that time, nobody will be scheduled to load at that point. I think that all the moving tenant need to obtain a time frame. So they bring the truck during some time frame. It won't be fun. We consult with the management team. They don't see the frequent would not be an issue to have. We have 2 loading bay there. They feel there's plenty enough. Yeah.
So somehow the delivery vehicles will be pulling in and staged somewhere there while they drop their, they're likely to come into somebody, with a bunch of deliveries.
The signage is important. We have signage consultant also would have all the sign clearly indicate.
I think part of the reason they took that approach too was so that you can see in this image here, there's a clear access point for, any vehicles that are coming to drop off packages to the main lobby and then towards the leasing area. So they don't have to travel a far distance when they're dropping those packages off, and they're going to be outside of the lane of travel. People are only going to be coming in, or going out along this sort of long driveway area. But in terms of a vehicle, either a loading van or delivery vehicle, they're going to be pulling off to this side over here to be able to deliver packages.
To one side of the delivery area there.
Yes, over into this area here.
But so they have to get to, they're coming in and then they have to back into that area. So they really will be doing
they could
K-turn.
either back in if they wanted to have the backside, so they would come in, do kind of a K-turn as shown on the screen, and then back in this way, right? They would drive in and then back in. Actually do this. This might be, nope, not that one. Here we go. So, oh, no, that's not going to work. Sorry. Anyway, so they're going to drive in, if anything, and then sort of pull in this side and then back in that way. Thank you. Or they would just pull in, head first towards the loading area from this turn in, and then back out and do sort of the reverse like K-turn to drive out.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's kind of unfortunate that there's so much going on there because you have people coming out of the garage at the same time. It could be held up on the ramp coming up from the garage for a truck that's pulling in, or a very large truck that's, with a moving vehicle, a moving van. They'll be sort of maneuvering their way into this kind of location with several probable turns. Seemed like an awful lot of activity in one area, and some of them will be in conflict with each other. So I have a real difficult question. You won't be able to really answer this one, but it had from the beginning seemed to me to be not unreasonable to imagine the main entry to this building in the very center between your sort of two protruding shapes onto El Camino. And a big building of this nature, frankly, requires a large entry area, and that seemed to be to me, the most obvious place for an entry into this building. Why did you consider that at some point?
We do have the option at the very, very beginning.
And then,
yeah, we have left, right, middle,
yeah,
all being considered.
uh-huh.
I think the off-site loading is kind of drive this configuration.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you have one garage entry in the middle and another off-site loading would be too many asphalt driveway. So we consolidate seems like unnecessary. So I think on the left side will be the best place, because on the right side there's a crosswalk to another side. So we move. I think that this location that's how we arrived to it.
I think the other thing to note is the objective standards don't really want to highlight driveways, right? And if it's, for example, if the idea was to have sort of a vehicle-centric concept, right, where there's a driveway down the center, you can sort of create this entry to it, but then you really sort of highlight where cars are coming in rather than maybe potentially where people are coming in. So I think, most of our standards are trying to push these entries sort of off to the side to be sort of minimized in terms of the architectural designs that we generally see. But from a pedestrian standpoint, they are trying to create that inviting space, as you can see on the diagram here, where that's going to be more just visually, a space that pedestrians are going to be able to see into the leasing, the co-working and the fitness space, and they'll be attracted to that more visually as they're walking across the site.
I've been giving it an awful lot of thought and thinking about it as I described, that the entry to the building in the middle is the most efficient area for people to enter. However, you really still will have drop off of other element of the packaging and things like that, which it would be harder to do that, especially on this particular sidewalk now, because the building is really rather close to the street still. If there had been a large sort of front space, you could have created a lay-by on El Camino, but it's beyond the possibility now, I would think, because of the bicycle path there as well. You wouldn't really want to interfere with that. So sort of you're back and forth in this kind of concept as to what's a good idea. And this goes too far back in the history of this project as well. So I should probably just forget about it. But and so I don't want to really belabor it, except for the fact that I really feel that pedestrian wise, the center entry is by far the better idea.
On that note, sort of throwing back to Peter's initial comment, if there is a retail space, that co-working element would be sort of the ideal spot for that retail, because it would be sort of centralized on the building. But again, a little bit beyond our scope at this point. All right, I have a pretty minimal question, and it's in regards to color. It's showing on the renderings that you guys have some red cutouts in some of these deeper recesses, and looking at some of those previous elevations or renderings that we were looking at before, A33.1 as an example. And then on A320, you have the color of plaster. Benjamin Moore AF 275. Yeah, that's fine. You can zoom in there. Zoom in on that central above the water column. So it appears on this and on some of the elevations is noted that all these red areas are going to be this Benjamin Moore. And I just would like some clarity. It appears we do not have a paint chip in person for this. Is that correct?
The material board we submit a year ago, unfortunately, couldn't be discovered in time.
Mhm.
So we kind of scrambled to only bring some of the main material. We
Okay.
can supply the paint chips. Yes.
And if I'm understanding the renderings correctly, that it would be that sort of trellis above the columns and some of these deeper recessed cutouts where the balconies are, that would be the red elements. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. In between the red and the wood color, I want to highlight there are cultural stone from ground all the way to the roof garden. There'll be a vertical cultural stone element. It's kind of hidden by the wood, but it was be one of the main expression.
So also in this rendering, there's a little bit of trees going on there. Am I understanding correctly that sort of that facade back, as it goes back into the balconies, that whole facade will be this red material and not the wood wrapping around?
Going back to the south side.
Right, so sort of like, let me see if I can outline.
Yeah, so based on the renderings, they're showing like they were doing within the balcony, this sort of recessed portion would be this cardinal red, so to speak.
Okay. All right.
And you
Yeah,
can
those-
also see that down along the same sort of diagonal cut into the building.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Could you please clarify what the lighter color used?
Again, those are not the real actual color. We have to find something from our library. It represents some of the metal panel, not exact color on the top level. I think in this rendering, in the club room and the left side of those units intend to use some of the metal color there.
If I may, I think we've had a great set of questions. Perhaps if we could get onto some comments regarding the project, since
Absolutely.
we are 2 hours in.
Yeah,
so.
you're reading my mind right now. I thought we were an hour and a half in. We're an hour 45, but yes, reading my mind, Stephen. So thank you to the applicant. We are going to close the discussion to the public comment and for the back and forth questions,
Thank
and
you.
we'll turn the discussion over to the ARB. I'd like to summarize our final sort of thoughts concisely to the applicant so that they have a clear understanding of where the ARB stands and what we are expecting from them as they move forward. Again, there's no vote on this. It really is just purely recommendations from the board. So if we'd like to maybe go down the line, or whoever feels so moved wants to kick us off here with some final comments. David, your light is on, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. All right, I'll go ahead and start. I think that overall, I'm very pleased with this design. We've seen it a few times across the board, and I think that the cohesion with the objective standards is quite successful. I really appreciate the ins and outs of the building. I appreciate the dynamic facade of this. I think there's been a lot of thoughtfulness in terms of how this will present. While I, in theory, agree with David's comment that the lobby could be centrally located would be a little bit nicer. I actually am totally fine with how this is angled from the two sides. I appreciate the thoughtfulness to the parking, the bike parking, the loading and unloading zones, the trash collection. I think that's been very, very well considered across the board. And additionally, hats off to the landscape architect. I think that's a really dynamic project in that regard as well, and will be a beautiful addition to the city. So I am quite fond of this. Now, my one caveat is I'm not the biggest fan of red, but that's just a personal preference, and I understand why that is there. So hence my red questions. And then lastly, I do also agree that there should be a little bit more of a thoughtfulness to the circulation between the main lobby and that sort of front corridor. So again, as you work with your interior designers, if there is a possibility for a little bit more of that cohesive circulation on that ground floor, I think you really do want to pay close attention to that. So with that, I'm going to close my comments. Thank you.
I can go next. I have just a few kind of similar comments. I think the building is very well designed, and I think the intent from the renderings are clear. And my main recommendation comment is that you follow through with the details that actually matches with the renderings. I think the deep recess windows in the front is really makes that building a three-dimensionally intriguing shape. And it's not just the shape of the overall facades, but each of those recess windows add to that. And I don't think a couple of inches of recess is going to get you there. And same with the balconies. I think the proportions of the balcony faces in your renders are in alignment with the overall mass of the building. And so, you know, that edge structure of the balcony visible, and then the balcony railing sitting above will not really carry through the same way as seen on the details. And as we discussed earlier, and Chair Rosenberg also pointed out, the first floor circulation does need some work. And I think, you know, just thinking about every person, family living in various corners of the building, how do they arrive? How do they get their mail-in packages and get to their unit? It shouldn't be, definitely should not have to go out back with your package out to the street and come back in another entrance. But you know, how do they get to the elevators in the back? You have a very generous amount of elevators in the building, located in 3 different spots. It just needs to be thought through for the ease of all the families living here. And as equitable as you can make of all the balconies as well. Some are just extremely tiny to be useful. And I don't mind the shared continuous balconies like what you have on the back side and in the front as well, as long as there's some privacy partition between them. So, and yeah, thank you for bringing a very thoughtful project to us today. Thank you. That's all.
There's some really terrific things that you've decided on very early in the game here, I think, with this pushing forward elements that really are sort of in scale with the old Palo Alto height limitations. And so the scale of the building is really rather terrific, keeping it closer to human scale somehow is. And I think you've done that really very well. And then differentiate all of those aspects on the roof and the dynamics of the of some of the way in which those roofs project out a little bit further. Kind of it makes this building pretty exciting. It's kind of Palo Alto's first venture into massive, really big buildings and population. And we need it desperately to answer the state's issues. So I think it's a prototype of something that should even be considered for the future for other buildings that happen in the city that keep that scale in our, so we should be really aware of that, and hopefully planning recognizes those elements as being very kind of important to the scale of the city here. I think all of the articulation on the facades also adds to that. And it would not be the same building if it were flush, everything flat. The excitement really comes in some of that detailing. And the selection of materials and alternate faces of the building seem to be well organized so that you turn the corners and make them into a mass, not just a facade element. I would say that sort of on the caution side, I think the area that you're using for the circulation really needs much more work and really kind of with the transportation engineer, but aesthetically to make it, because it became, you're creating this as the main lobby. So you really don't want to have people come to this building and have to look at other aspects of it. So creating kind of enclosures and methods of doing that might improve the building significantly at that point to focus your attention on the front instead of what's going on kind of in the background with loading and unloading, et cetera. Seems to be a problematic area of the building. Wouldn't it have been nice if somehow or other the loading, unloading could happen in the cellar space and not even evident on this piece? But I think it's hard to do that as well, heights, et cetera, of the garage areas and expense of that sort of thing. And where is the space for it, since you really need just about every car parking area that you have. But I too think it's been a tough job and well done.
Thank you so much for your application, and I do appreciate the well-thought-out site plan, and I think it's quite successful, although there are some minor internal circulation issues that need to be improved. And I think overall, there are lots of good features that I like, the different amenity spaces that provided in different levels, and also the multiple roof terrace that is quite interesting and attractive to the tenants here. And also, I think the materials, generally speaking, it's also high quality and also very compatible with the scale of the building. But one minor thing is maybe you could consider about the long-term bike storage, all the clear glazing used there, because we have other projects coming saying about concern about the security for the bicycle storage. So hopefully the clear glazing used here will be successful, or you might need to think about some other solutions. Personally, I'm not a big fan about the red vertical walls along the El Camino Way. I think it's too strong. It's the angled wall that you're creating, the massing you created is already very exciting. And I think the vertical red walls are kind of competing with those angled massing elements. So, but that's just my personal opinion on that. But overall, I do like the design, and thank you so much.
Thank you. This is an excellent project. We should do everything we can to approve it as fast as possible. I think the site planning works very well. I think the facades are well designed. I think the materials are high quality. I think the design seems to work well for the tenants who will be there. There's lots of amenities and details that will make living here wonderful. I'll throw out three suggestions that might improve it. One is to focus on the details of the windows to get a little more depth on the installation. We've gone through this in some depth. But when you look at the details that are in this packet, at least everything is flush to the exterior walls, and that's not really what your renderings are showing, and it will be better if you can get more depth. And you know that, and we're suggesting it again so we can work through that. Secondly, the ground floor circulation would be greatly improved by these very simple suggestions we've made. So just consider that. To planning, please find a way to make it so they can convert to retail without going through an approval process. When they tried to think about doing it, the thought of going through the Palo Alto process makes it hard for them to commit to that. As our economist resident told us, it's about the money. If they can see an easy way to do that, we'll all benefit when that leasing space becomes a coffee shop or a bike repair store, something that really will benefit this increased growth in residential area in Palo Alto. Just find a way to put it in the entitlement that this other use would also be allowed, so that all they have to do is get a TI permit for the building, and it'll happen easier for them. I'd like to comment that I'm so delighted to see staff really working what I say proactively, Garrett, to really get with them, get in the weeds, make the project work. Really hats off to you and the planning department for first time I've seen in many, many years that you've just worked with the applicant to find a project that works. We've avoided a builder's remedy project. We've brought something together that really meets our standards, and we've compromised, they've compromised. It really works. I'm also pleased to see that the objective standards seem to be working. This is a reasonably good building. I've heard from the architect that it just helped give them some guardrails to bring it together. And that's delightful. I was very skeptical about that, but again, thank you for making that work. I can just hear from your comments that you're into this building. It's in your head. That's the way it should be. You're a planner. You're helping plan the town. It's really great. So congratulations on that. This is a good project. We should approve it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Just as a final wrap up, is the applicant clear on the comments and suggestions as presented by the ARB? Peter succinctly gave us the three final comments there, and just to add to those, the balcony detailing and the potential of just making sure that that transportation entry is aesthetically pleasing and truly functional. Do you guys have any last questions in regards to anything that's outstanding? Okay, thank you very much. At this time, there is no recommendation required. So again, hats off to Garrett. Thank you very much. And I would like to ask that we take a 5-minute recess before seeing the next project. I see a lot of people sitting here waiting, and I apologize for that, but we did go almost 2 hours on this project. So just 5 minutes, quick coffee and restroom break, and we'll be right back. Thank you all. All right, if everyone can resume their seats, we'll get started in just a moment. Thank you to everyone who's been patiently waiting for this project to be seen. We can see that there's quite a few of you out in the room here today, so appreciate your patience while we went through that first project. Okay. We are looking at action item number 3. This is a public hearing quasi judicial for 70 Encina Avenue. Consideration of an application to rezone the subject property and an adjacent vacant parcel to planned community / planned home zoning to demolish a surface parking lot and to construct a new 3-story, 22,355 square foot building with 10 residential condominium units, 2 of which would be provided at below market rate. The recommendation for today is from staff recommends that the Architectural Review Board provide comments on the draft project plans, development plan, development program statement, and development schedule as provided in attachments E and G, and continue to a date uncertain. With that, we will hand this over to Ms. Callis. Oh, excuse me. Thank you, Peter. On this one, we will need disclosures. So first of all, we're going to ask if we're going to go down the line and just acknowledge that each board member has or has not visited the site. So we'll start with board member Adcock. Yes. Member Chen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, of course.
And David, visit the site?
Yeah, many times.
Okay. If there are any additional disclosures, we ask that the board members speak to those at this time.
I can start. I did meet with the architects on this project a couple of weeks ago. Thank you.
Yeah, same here. I met the architect on October 3rd, and I think the information are all covered in this package and drawing set.
Same as well. And additionally, just for on that note, each person met individually. It was not a group meeting. There was no multiple members in the ARB in a meeting at any given time.
Yeah, I disclosed that I met with the architect, but I didn't learn anything that's not in the public record.
I talked with the architect and have also talked with Dean Rubinson, who owns the shopping center, whose company owns the shopping center.
Okay. Excellent. At this time, we'll hand it over for a staff presentation. Thank you, Ms. Callis.
Hi, good morning. My name is Emily Callis. I'm the project planner for the 70 Encina planned home zoning project. There we go. Okay, so this is a planned home zoning or planned community project, which means it goes through an extensive process of public meetings. It began with a pre-screening in September of 2022, which was for a substantially different project, 5 stories, more units. The project was redesigned and presented to a preliminary architectural review board meeting in December of last year. This was followed by the formal submittal of the PC application in March of this year. Staff review is ongoing on the project. The initial PTC hearing was September, and now we are at the first architectural review board meeting for this project. It is anticipated that this project will return for a second ARB, at which point we will ask for a recommendation. The Planning and Transportation Commission will also give a recommendation, and then council makes the final decision. And public comments are accepted at all public hearings and at any time throughout this process. The project location is shown on this map here. It is 2 parcels that are adjacent to and surrounded by the Town and Country Shopping Center and its parking lot. It is across Encina Avenue from the Palo Alto Medical Foundation office and other offices. The Opportunity Center is also in this neighborhood, and this project is a short walk from the Palo Alto Caltrain station. The proposed project includes 10 condominiums with garages in a 3-story building organized around a central driveway. 2 of the condo units will be provided at below market rates. As a PC project, it is able to create its own development standards for the development. And what is being proposed is a 1.86 floor area ratio, where 1.25 is typically allowed under the existing community commercial zoning. The project proposes 58% lot coverage, where 50% is typically allowed, a 0-foot rear setback where 10 feet is required for residential uses. The usable open space is provided in balconies for this project. They vary in size from 79 square feet to 155 square feet, where the development standard is 150 square feet of usable open space per unit. And the project has less ground level landscaping than the 30% that is required by the CC zoning for residential uses. This slide shows the site plan and second floor plan. The entry to the building is along Encina Avenue, along the central driveway, from which they turn into single-family garages. This project is less than a quarter mile from the Caltrain station, meaning that AB 2097 does apply. However, all of the units have at least 1 parking space. Additionally, the balconies are overlooking the central driveway, and 6 trees are proposed. The Office of Transportation has concerns about the queuing that could be caused by the entry gate at the driveway, and the time it may take for that gate to open, as well as turning into those first 2 garages based on the location of that gate. Oh, real quick, also, each unit provides bike parking in the garage, and there is 1 short-term bike rack in the front setback area. The next few slides compare the proposed elevations to what was presented to the ARB in December of last year for the preliminary plans. The top image here is the front seen from Encina. The bottom image is the preliminary plans. Overall, the materials, and the material board is up with you at the dais, have been lightened in response to ARB feedback. Likewise, this shows the western elevation, which is adjacent to the drive aisle into the Town and Country parking area. This is the rear, which is adjacent to a delivery drive aisle for Town and Country. And this is the eastern elevation. This also shows 2 of the kind of isometric renderings showing both the view from Town and Country and the view from Encina. Key considerations for the Architectural Review Board to consider are the compliance with the site development regulations and the exceptions that are being requested, the relationship to Town and Country as it relates to the building scale and architecture, as well as it relates to land uses and operational concerns for the shopping center, the proposed landscaping, and reduced usable open space. We have received public comments from Ellis Partners, the operators of Town and Country. The comment letters express concern regarding the late night and early morning activities that the shopping center needs to maintain their operations, such as site maintenance, refuse pickup, and deliveries, as they're concerned about the potential impact to parking, although staff believes that the CCNRs may be able to address this since this is a condominium project, as well as the architectural compatibility. And then staff recommends that the Architectural Review Board take the following actions to propose or to provide comments and continue to a date uncertain. This concludes my presentation. The applicant has a presentation prepared as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Callis. Again, to the ARB, if you have any questions specifically to staff, limited in scope to how this is processing, anything like that, now is a great time to ask those types of questions.
I do have one question just regarding the zoning. So this is currently a CC zoning, and if I understand correctly, this project is requesting a PHC planned home zoning. So does, but all the, the zoning exceptions analysis is based on the PC. Does that still apply as PHC, or is it like a PC where it makes its own zoning?
Yes, so it is a PC application which creates its own zoning. The CC development standards were provided for reference, as that would be what would be required if it was not proposing a PC.
And follow up on that, like we've seen in other projects, has the PC zoning, its own zoning, has that been already developed?
No, the PC, so the PC process includes coming to the Architectural Review Board for review of the development plan. Then we would return to the Planning and Transportation Commission with a proposed ordinance that aligns with that development plan.
Okay.
And then both would be forwarded to council for a final decision.
Okay, so kind of like the outcome of this meeting plus the PTZ would inform that PC zoning that's then developed for this.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I believe we've seen this project twice before. Once was a study session, though. Am I remembering that correctly?
It was one time before for a preliminary architectural review board, which was a separate application prior to receiving this.
So wasn't there a 5-story proposal at first for this project?
That was a city council
Or City Council,
pre-screening.
not the ARB.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
So kind of related to that, you said this would be the first meeting, but it's really the second. How does that, because they're limited to 3 and we want to limit to 3 or fewer, but is this number 1 or 2?
So this is not a streamlined housing project. So there is not formally a limit in the number of meetings. However, in terms of the typical process, I pulled that slide back up. It basically goes council, PTC, ARB, PTC council. But the applicant, due to the redesigns between the initial council meeting and the PTC meeting, had chose to have a preliminary architectural review board meeting. That was optional.
Okay, thank you.
It's fair to say that this has been in the works for about 2 years now. Is that right? I'm sorry. It's fair to say this has been in the planning process for about 2 years. The initial pre-screening was September of 2022.
Yes, I would have to go back and check the dates regarding how many months were between the pre-screening meeting and when the preliminary architectural review board plans were submitted, but in general, yes.
Thank you.
So this particular site in this particular parking lot, the rest of the site is a parking lot. How was it defined as unrelated to the parking lot? Why is it being developed separately?
This property is not owned by the same owners who own the rest of the land that is leased to Town and Country for the shopping center. It was sold to another, the current property owner who is choosing to develop it. The parking for Town and Country does still meet our zoning parking requirements without these 2 parcels.
There are 2 parcels that make up this site.
It's currently 2 parcels and they would do a lot merger as a part of the project.
I have a follow-up question on that. So Town and Country, I forget what it's called, it is kind of has its own defined, development plan. Is this, are these two lots within that boundary or not?
Town and Country does not have a development plan. As we noted in the staff report, there is a master sign program and a master facade program, which regulate mainly the appearance of the existing buildings. It does not regulate future development. The zoning code and our comprehensive plan do refer to the Town and Country Shopping Center as being bound by Encina Avenue, Embarcadero Road, El Camino Real, and the Caltrain right-of-way. However, we feel that this project can still be consistent and will need to be designed in a way that does not impact the operation of the shopping center.
So presumably another, when I look at the property boundaries, I forget where the map, but there it is. These are two properties currently. There are other properties that are really part of parking lots. Presumably they could also be individually or double, triple sold, and other developments could come in the future, correct? So this would not be forever, just two buildings, presumably. Is that true?
I think theoretically they could be sold off separately, but a number of the other parcels, I believe, are owned by Town and Country, and therefore they do have control over the use of those parcels.
But that doesn't preclude them from selling off or developing themselves as other types of uses other than Town and Country Shopping Center. As long as they meet parking requirements.
As long as they met the parking
Right.
requirements for their use.
Okay. And I have a housing element question. So one of these lots have been allocated, or, not allocated, could have up to 4 units. And the two lots seem about the same size. Just theoretically, if both lots were part of the housing element, what's typical with that? Say, the capacity of these two is 8, 10, 12, like from how housing element allocates the number of potential development, what would this be?
Yeah, so the way that the housing element site allocation worked, it was assuming a mixed use project because that was what was allowed in the base zoning. And it also assumed based on the zoning regulations. And so that was the capacity based on those restrictions. Under the PC ordinance and proposal, it could be higher, especially as it's not proposed as a mixed use project.
So even each one of those lots without the mixed use component could have 6, 7 units, so times 2 by housing element, allocation numbers.
They would need to rezone because I believe that the base allowance is a mixed use under the CC. Yeah, that's true. The housing element site itself, I think, would be allowed to develop as fully residential.
Correct.
But the other site that's not identified as a housing element or housing inventory site would have to comply with the mixed use requirements. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I'm just trying to understand what would be a, development capacity that the city would, put on this together as just a basis of how we evaluate this. Does that make sense? Like, other properties, like even the one we looked at today has a capacity about just under 400, and what they propose is right around that number. And other properties are plus minus, like the townhouses we looked at a few weeks ago. So just over that, we using the housing element umbrella, like what would the development capacity of these sites be? That's what I'm trying to understand. Because only one of them is in the housing element site with a capacity of 4 as a mixed use, is what you just said. And that's what's in the report as well.
Let me think about it and we can answer that
Okay,
question in a
thank you.
minute.
Can you explain what happens to the parking that had been on this lot prior to it being separated?
This property has already been taken out of the parking stock for Town and Country. There is a fence around the project. These spaces are not counted towards Town and Country's parking requirements, and they do have enough parking spaces based on the zoning code as it is currently.
Okay. Thank you, staff, for your presentation and for your answers to our questions. At this time, we're going to turn this over to the applicant for their presentation. You'll have 10 minutes to speak. As you come up to the microphone, please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Ed Storm Land Group, and we're the applicants of this project. I'm going to make a few brief comments and turn it over to Jeff. We started this project about 2.5 years ago with the idea the city wanted more housing stock, and that was something we thought we could help and assist with. And we found this property, which is ideally located for housing. We can go into that in a second, but we came forward with a 5-story building. We were opposed only by one person, the Town and Country Shopping Center. They indicated to us if we shrunk that down, they'd probably give us their support. We've shrunk it to 3 stories. They have still not supporting the project. And we think they have unique reasons for not supporting it that we'll never satisfy. So they're always going to be opposed to it. There's an opportunity here, though, to build this housing that the city wants. It's an ideal location. It's got transit, it's got amenities, it's got access to downtown. By walking, you don't have to drive very often. You can go to Stanford, you can go to Panth. If we build this, it will show people this is a great housing location. But we need your help. We've done everything we can do to make this project viable. We've spent time and treasure and everything to make it happen. But I thought the city would be a supporter. I thought the city wanted the housing. So I'm a little surprised how difficult it's been. It's going to take us less time to build this by half than it's going to get it if we do get approved, to get it approved. So when I come here today, I hope you will look at us being partners, getting things done and getting housing built. You can always find reasons to say no, but I think this brings a lot of good things to this location. So I'm not going to belabor this, but I'll turn it over to Jeff to make a formal presentation, but we would appreciate your support and move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. My name is Jeff Galbraith, spelled Jeffgalbraith. I'm with Hayes Group Architects. I'm excited to be here with you. So jumping into the presentation, just as a reminder, we're coming to you off the heels of our PTC hearing in September, where we received unanimous recommendation to come before you. Thrilled to be here and present the current iteration of this project. So the first few slides are just compare the design that you saw a year ago at the preliminary ARB and list some of the comments that we've addressed since then. The first is the color palette. There was concern about that being too dark. You can see a significant lightening of that, particularly at the upper 2 stories. Also questions and concerns about not enough street presence and sort of eyes on the street, engagement with the street. You can see on the new design that we've essentially doubled the glazing, almost at each of the floors. Part of what allowed us to do that was taking those front unit footprints and flipping them, mirroring them, so that the stairs, which used to be internalized, were pushed to the exterior facade. That creates a space that's sort of semi-private, a space where it's more acceptable to have more glazing, and also, frankly, activates the facade more than windows that might peer into more private spaces and tend to be more covered. We've also modified the sense of scale of the project by shifting the emphasis to horizontal bands at each floor, whereas previously there was a little bit more of a vertical emphasis on the upper stories. Moving around to the back corner, some concerns about this were the lack of a rear setback, questions about fire access, and questions about compatibility with the town and country design language. You can see that there's a key shift that's happened at the upper 2 stories, where what used to be a solid volume, or a blank wall, frankly, which enclosed occupied space and had to be fire rated because of its proximity to the lot line, was pushed back 4 feet. It's replaced in its place by a screen. So you've got vertical screening elements that create some privacy, allow you to see through and get more spatial engagement and help soften that rear facade. It also, frankly, creates a space where, which was required as we worked closely with the fire department to make sure we had accessible or access rather to the roof. And so the screen on the right of the image on the bottom actually conceals an access stair that's accessible to the fire department to reach the rooftop. We've also set back the ground floor facade at the outer corners where they're most visible, right, to passerbys and neighbors. So we've set back that facade and taken the sort of column and beam element along the edge there and pulled it all the way back to the rear corner. We've added a deep recess on the side of the rear unit. That's required actually to accommodate fire department ladders to get to the bedrooms that are on the back corner. And you can see that we've taken the roof line at the rear units and brought that down to a flat parapet instead of being peaked upwards, which brings down the scale a little bit. And also just increase the porosity at the ground floor at that rear corner, which is the piece, right, that's most visible as you're walking through town and country at this edge. Just looking a little bit more closely at the side facade, you can see that, again, there was questions about fire access, the trellises that were there, and compatibility. The trellis elements themselves and those side yards really had to open up, in part in response to, or mostly in response to fire department comments. They need to be, they can't be places where tenants can store things, right, that would prevent the fire department's access in an emergency. And frankly, as we peeled those fences back and got rid of the trellis elements, what we found is that it actually creates a much better spatial engagement between the project and the parking area and those who walk back and forth, because that space that's sort of captured by the column and beam elements becomes an engagement, and it also allows much more visibility of the vines that are growing up the side facades. Let's see, and another comment was just question about right, compatibility with town and country and how the project is really going to be seen from within town and country village. And there are a few places where it will be seen. This is standing at a corner, looking over the sort of the rear line of shops there. You can see that the project sits nicely. It doesn't tower above town and country. It has a rear facade which feels like a face. I think it does a good job of creating a nice dialogue where the screen elements and the board and batten materiality create a good level of scale. It's compatible with elements of town and country and provides enough screening while allowing some engagement with the windows there. Some other comments that we heard were questions about vehicular access to the front and rear units, questions about how the electrical service would be resolved, and a comment about window privacy at units that are across each other in the courtyard. You can see here, this is the ground floor plan, the original a year ago on the left and the current now, very similar. The red side yards, of course, are now fire and utility access only, no longer private side yards. And the front of the project, where it used to neck down and had only a 14-foot or 16-foot gate, actually 14-foot gate with 16-foot between the doors, has now been widened out so that that full 30-foot wide courtyard width comes all the way out to the facade. The gate itself is increased now to 18 feet. And you can see also that flipping those units took the garage entries and pushed them much deeper into the site, making it much easier to maneuver cars in and out. I think it's also worth noting that there's been a few comments about questions about queuing and cars getting out and into the site. And I would just point out that it's a small development, right? We've got 10 units, and there is street parking all along both edges of Encina. And so what you can see here with the car turning in is that whether that space, well, that space, even as parallel parking, creates a buffer there that a car can pull into and get enough out of the way. And frankly, much of the traffic coming into this street is going to turn into the Town and Country entry to the left, right, of the drawing. It's of course a dead end as you approach the train tracks. We work closely with BCAF, our civil engineer, to do turning radius diagrams for both of the modified units in the front, both coming and going, as well as the 2 units in the back, to prove out the feasibility or viability of the layout. Let's see, again, jumping back to the ground floor, you can see here the current proposal of the electrical transformer that's at the upper left corner of the plan. That is shown in a subgrade vault under the sidewalk, and the trash room remains where it was initially. The upper floors really haven't changed much at all, other than those front 2 units flipping and a little bit of adjustment at the rear units to shrink them a bit to create that setback at the upper 2 floors. You see there, it's about 4 feet off the rear property line, and to make sure we have fire access. And lastly, the comment about windows across from each other, which was a great comment. You can see that the second bedrooms in each of these units had a little too much visibility into each other. And we were able to address that pretty well, I think, by offsetting those windows and shrinking them down a little bit so that you never get a direct view into the center of a bedroom across the courtyard. Again, we're thrilled to be here and thrilled to hear your comments and see the project move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, we will open the floor for public comment. Each person who would like to speak will be allotted 3 minutes. If you have a group, the allotment will be up to 15 minutes. Should be speaker cards with Veronica or raised hands on the Zoom.
Yeah, I have 3 speaker cards and 1 raised hand. First speaker is Herb Borak.
You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and if you can kindly state and spell your name for the record.
Hi, Herb Borak. My name is spelled the same way as on the speaker's card I submitted. Herb, H-E-R-B, Borak, B-O-R-O-C-K. I don't believe this item is properly before you because it's a segment of a larger project that includes parts of the adjacent Town and Country Village. For example, fencing off the parking lot that's now labeled as 70 Encina required Town and Country to change the striping for stalls and vehicle circulation on the adjacent parcel. The original fencing was illegal fencing and was reported to the staff and never did anything about enforcing it. I had requested public notice on the Town and Country restriping parking lot project, which is acknowledged by staff, and I never received the public notice when that was approved at staff level. Similarly, the staff approved a replacement fence to the fence, even though it never enforced the original fencing. And when it did that was in June, after your last meeting in June and before your first meeting in July, when the council was on vacation. And when you came back in July, your agendas descriptions changed. Under the staff report, you now have what new projects have been submitted. In the past, you had what staff level decisions have been made to give the public constructive notice that they could request a hearing before the ARB. This is also coming to you as planned home zoning, which is a zone district that's never been approved by the city council as required by the zoning code. Under the comprehensive plan and the planning, the area that's defined as one area is the area zone CC, bounded by certain streets. Under standard rules of statutory construction, changing the zoning of something at some future time doesn't change, or making an application for that doesn't change the area as one unit to be discussed. So we have a situation here where we're getting a segment of a project that the California Environmental Quality Act says is a violation because there's only one whole project rather than each separate discretionary approval. I've looked at in the past the application submittals that have been made by Town and Country Village. It wanted one for Valley Parking, and it installed it even though it withdrew the application. And it tended to include consistently the public parking on Encina Avenue as part of its parking, which it is not. So I'm not sure if these two entities are opposed to each other, or they're just working together to get a solution that meets both their cases. But the only way the public and the commissions and boards can actually evaluate this is with a proper environmental review, and therefore this is not properly before you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next is Dean Rubinson.
Could kindly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
My name is Dean Rubinson, DeanRubinson. I'm the Director of Development for Ellis Partners, have been overseeing planning, design, and construction for Town and Country for over 19 years. And I'm deeply concerned about the project and the impact it would have despite the changes from 5 stories to 3 stories. That doesn't make it a good project. I'd also like to have time to meet with all of you individually as the architect has. We only found out about a week ago about this meeting, so perhaps before the next meeting, we can make that occur. For the last 2 years, we've consistently raised our concerns about this project landing in our north parking lot on a 1/4 acre. We clearly understand the need for additional housing in Palo Alto. We have concerns about this project, and we echo the feedback that the applicant has consistently received from the ARB and the PTC so far, most of which has been ignored by the applicant. As you can tell from their before and after images today, there's been very, very minor changes. Most of those comments relate to bulk and mass, the lack of setbacks and buffers, and addressing the parking and operational concerns that we have in addition to trees. In short, their zero lot line project offers inadequate buffering from early morning truck noise that exists and provides only 16 stalls for 26 bedrooms with 0 guest parking. Given the setting, this project is just too dense. Despite the applicant's resistance, perhaps 10 3-bedroom condos at $2 million each just isn't the right project for this 1/4 acre. It's certainly not worth risking the vitality and attractiveness of Town and Country neighborhood treasure. Lastly, I'd like to clarify that staff's intended use of a CEQA exemption for infill projects that are consistent with the comp plan is wholly inappropriate. There are 10 comp plan notice policies noted in the staff report, 5 of which relate specifically to Town and Country. It's plainly clear that this project is inconsistent with nearly all of them, such as the lack of compatibility, lack of new greenery, prohibition of conversion of Town and Country to residential use, lack of preservation of Town and Country in its pedestrian scale, lack of enhancing vibrant retail and urban greening, and certainly the lack of maintaining and adding trees. They're removing many thriving trees, and by paying in lieu fees, that's not going to enhance greenery at Town and Country. Most of the trees you see on the images are our trees. The city may choose to approve this project, hopefully after major revisions, but to say it's currently consistent with the comp plan is just not true. The project must undergo appropriate environmental review, as all projects should. Furthermore, we believe the comp plan revision is required for this project to proceed, given the prohibition to convert Town and Country to residential. Conversion from a parking lot to residential is still a conversion of uses. Despite what staff is suggesting, this parcel, which is outlined as a perimeter of streets, it's not related to the ownership and it's not related to the use. There's a car wash within that boundary. This is a district, not a use. I think the press, I'll just clarify because it was a misconstrued point. The precedent that this would create would allow us to take the parking lot next to Trader Joe's. As long as we built a below ground parking lot there, we could build residential between Trader Joe's and CVS because it's basically saying if it's not used as town and country, it can then be converted to anything we want it to be. The whole idea of this boundary is that town and country is a district and should be, adhered to the comp plan. We've sent a letter from our council, Fox Rothschild, clarifying our official position on these considerations and the risk to the project of future legal action. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Next is Randy Pop.
Morning, Randy. If you could please state and spell your name for the record.
Good morning, Chair and members of the board. My name is Randy Pop, R-A-N-D-Y, P-O-P-P, and I am both a local resident, architect, and past member of the ARB. I'm here today as a critic hired by Ellis Partners to help them evaluate the project adjacent to the property in Town and Country Village. I've stated my concerns and other thoughts in a letter sent to Ellis Partners, which is included in your packet. Hopefully you've all had a chance to read that. In summary, I'm concerned feedback provided to the applicant and team have not been incorporated. Having sat in your place, my hope is that you will forcefully reiterate your concerns and provide input to clarify the need to meet our standards for a project that will exist as part of the fabric of our community for years to come. The project you just reviewed was collaboratively developed as a contextually appropriate design. Massing, setbacks, overall organization are thoughtful and reasonable. Contrast that with the project before you that is creating impacts and pressure in so many areas. The density and massing of this project continues to be problematic. It is and will remain for the foreseeable future an island in a parking lot. The lack of buffer to adjacent uses and minimal space for landscape within the boundary of the parcel is unresolved. Parking and concerns related to noise, particularly elements adjacent to the service corridor where trash and deliveries begin at 4 a.m. have not been properly addressed. The concessions you are being asked to make are out of scale with the value of this project and what it delivers. I might feel differently if this had a higher below market rate component, but it does not. This is 10 multi-million-dollar units. Relative to RENA, I want every unit we can get. And this is a reasonable site for housing, but the cost here is too high. The team is led by one of the most creative and capable architects in our community. I'm hopeful clear direction from you will help reinforce to their client the need for changes to create a project we can all appreciate as a success. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
And then next is our Zoom speaker from Amy Ashton.
Or if you could please state and spell your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Amy Ashton, AMIEASHTON, and Executive Director of Palo Alto Forward. We all submitted a letter in support of this project as well. As we all know, it's a very constrained site. And I think it's something we'll see a lot more of as our housing element is implemented. We'll have to be creative. We urge you to provide concise, productive comments to keep this project moving. It's been going through the process for 2+ years. Delays really do kill housing projects. And we should note this project is also half its original size. So on a personal note, I live a few blocks away and I walk to shop at Town and Country at least 3 to 5 times per week. It's an amazing amenity to have nearby. I look forward to new neighbors at the site and new shoppers to support and strengthen the Town and Country Shopping Center. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
That's all our speakers.
Great. Thank you very much. Sorry, what was that? Okay. At this time, if there are no questions for any of the public speakers from the board, we turn the floor back over to the applicant for a 10-minute rebuttal time. So if you have any comments that you'd like to make as response and a rebut to any of the public comments that were made, you have 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, just a few comments. I think we've appreciated all of the feedback we've gotten from the board as well as from Town and Country, and have been thoughtful about how we would process those and figure out how to incorporate the solutions that address them. There's some comments that keep coming back up, things like noise concerns related to lack of setbacks and buffers. And I think for those of us who work in this industry, we understand that adding 5 feet or so doesn't really change noise much, right? Adding a little bit of a setback. What does make a difference is how the facades are constructed, how we build the building. And there are codes in place like Cal Green that dictate the noise levels that are acceptable within residential units. And as part of the project, as it moves forward and goes into building construction design, there will be acoustical studies that measure on-site noise. We will have consultants that help inform us about how to develop those facades and how to specify glazing and so forth. I think there's many of these issues that are very manageable. We've done it many times successfully, and we don't see those being issues preventing this from being a successful project. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we close the public portion of the meeting and we turn the discussion back to the ARB, who may have questions for the applicant, so please don't go too far, and for the staff as well. On this note of noise complaints, I would like a little bit of clarification from staff, if that's all right. It seems that the Town and Country Village and the applicant are both having, well, I guess it's the Town and Country Village, has concerns that their operations at 4 a.m. may negatively impact the tenants of this building. Am I understanding that correctly? Okay, I'm
Yes.
seeing head nods in
Yes.
the gallery. Okay. Yes. Okay. To the applicant, in terms of these noise concerns, is there any sort of, will there be triple pane glazing? What's the concern? And I guess I have to admit, I'm a touch confused why Town and Country Village is worried that their 4 a.m. productivity is going to negatively impact the tenants of this building when the tenants are not necessarily Town and Country's concern.
Right, right. So as I started to explain, what will happen is we'll have an acoustical engineer come on site and actually measure on-site noise levels. So as they go through a week, they will leave physical measuring devices in place. And so as these things happen, trash trucks come and pick things up, those noises will be measured, and they'll have a report that says, okay, decibel levels on the site, at these times a day, reach these levels. They'll look at the proximity of those noise sources to the project, and they'll come back to us with recommendations that say, okay, in order to meet Cal Green requirements that I believe are like 50 decibels within a residential unit, you're going to need glazing that meets STC, 40 or 37 or whatever that number is. And then we go back and we work with our glazing specifiers to achieve that, right? Make sure that we meet those requirements. And I'll reiterate again that the whole way that the project is designed is so that the exterior, like the bedrooms, places that are more sensitive to noise, right, are located around the central courtyard as opposed to being on the perimeter, the outside. It's going to be more exposed to noise. In our experience working up and down the peninsula, the things that tend to be the biggest noise contributors are actually the train, which thankfully now with electrification is better, and early morning truck traffic on El Camino Real.
Great, thank you. And then to the speaker from the Town and Country representative, is the concern that if there are complaints from the tenants that would negatively impact how you're able to do your business, is there concern that moving forward, you guys might be restricted in some way? I just would like really to understand what the concern is with this.
We're not exactly sure how it will play out, but we know what we do. And we know that if you put housing right next to us, there will be complaints. And if we get calls in 3-4 years from the city, we're going to have to deal with the conflict. And we're just trying to highlight that there will be a conflict. It could be that they handle it with better glazing, like you mentioned. It could be that buffers are an idea, but we're not concerned about them as our tenants. We're concerned about them as our neighbors. And we don't want to set up a situation where we all have problems. And the same relates to parking. And as much as the CCNR may say, you cannot park in Town and Country Village, I can assure you that guests will come to this property. There will be no guest parking. They will park on our property, and then we will have to put violations on their cars and have to work with the city to resolve another conflict. So we feel there's not enough parking. We're just trying to highlight for the ARB that this is a conflict in the future that we're going to have to face with the city.
Understood. Thank you for the clarification. To the staff on that note, if they were to provide guest parking, how many spaces approximately would it be? And I understand I'm putting you on the spot here, making you do a little mental gymnastics. Are we talking that they would be required to have 2 spaces? Are we talking 20 spaces?
Palo Alto does not have a standard for guest parking. Guest parking is not required for any housing development project.
So even if this was, for example, again, this is completely hypothetical, if this was a multi-condo unit instead of townhouses, there would be no difference in requirements.
That's correct. Parking is only based on the number of bedrooms per unit. And additionally, this project is within the AB 2097 boundaries that limit our ability to require any parking.
Okay, thank you. To the applicant, just as a quick question for you, again, sorry, I'm hogging the board here for just a moment longer. Is there any possibility of having one of those spaces when we talk about, Amazon deliveries, Uber Eats deliveries, things like that? Is there any sort of consideration for how that would be handled? And again, to make sure that they're not impacting town and country, is there potentially a designated space on Encina that would be loading and unloading only? Can you speak to that concern?
Off the top of my head, I can't see any objection that we would have to designating a space as loading and unloading along Encina Avenue if the city was open to that.
And that would be a city question as well.
For additional clarification, we do require loading spaces for more than 50 housing units. So obviously this project is below that threshold. When a loading space is required, it is preferred to be on-site loading. We likely would not support converting an existing public parking space to a loading space that would restrict its current use as a regular parking space.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Can I just, if
Please,
I
Claire.
may, I would just note that there's a bike path at the end of Encina. And so I think that we really want to ensure that we are preserving potential rights in that right of way for future bike connections, especially given all of the bike improvements going on in El Camino, that leads into our Caltrain. So I think we want to be careful about what is being put in the right of way for this
As
site.
well, okay, understood. Thank you for that. All right, that's my questions for now. I'll turn it over to other board members.
Yeah, I do.
We all have questions.
Will this project be going through an environmental quality review?
Yes, as noted in the staff report, it is currently under review. We are anticipating preparing a exemption, a 15183 exemption that allows for projects that are consistent with the comprehensive plan to be exempt from CEQA review, such as an MND or EIR when it meets other requirements and does not create a significant impact.
I'd like to drill in, if I could, on the statement Mr. Rubinson made about potential future use of the town and country. Before that, even if you don't do the chair, I'd like to ask him a question directly, if you could. I heard you state what I'd say are legitimate concerns about having residential use adjacent to town and country, that the noise of your operations will impact any residential use in your experience, and you're concerned that they're going to impact your parking usage on your site. Is there any residential use you could conceive of adjacent to town and country that would be acceptable to you?
I think we're suggesting that an appropriately designed residential project here with appropriate scale and appropriate noise buffers would certainly be appropriate here. We're not opposed to residential.
With all respect, the comments you made preclude any residential is going to be impacted by noise and it's going to impact your parking. Those are true statements.
It depends upon the design and the density. If they built more parking, then there would be, right now they have, I think, 26 bedrooms and 14 parking spaces. And I understand there's a Caltrain station a half mile away, but I also know Palo Alto, and it's unlikely that in a 3-bedroom apartment, there's less than 2 cars there, let alone, more likely it's going to be 3 cars there. So we're just trying to reflect reality. So I think a project that has adequate parking and adequate noise buffers could certainly be appropriate at this location.
Just to the chair once more, we heard from the applicant about how they would address the noise. That's fairly convincing. And if they're meeting the current parking requirements of the zoning code, isn't that meeting requirements? What I'm hearing you ask for is
well, the zoning code doesn't require them to have any parking.
I'm trying to determine what it would take to get your support. The city wants your support. The city wants housing. Where's the middle of that?
If there was, at least from our standpoint, if there was a believable amount of parking, okay, we're talking about 10 3-bedroom apartments. I think there's a couple of 2-bedrooms, so 26 bedrooms. Palo Alto is largely a driving community, despite there being a Caltrain station and a bike path. How many of those residents are going to own a car? Do you think it's going to be 16 of these 26 bedrooms? I don't. I think there are going to be at least 5 or 6 additional residents who won't have a place to park in this building. And you can imagine if you were the owner of the adjacent parking lot, or this was your house, you'd be worried that they're going to park in front of your house.
Yes.
And that's our concern. And we think that with additional parking or perhaps fewer units, it could be appropriately designed for the setting.
Okay, thanks for that answer. To the staff, could you clarify his comments about future use of town and country, that they could or couldn't put other housing there? What is the status of that, please?
So currently, any future development at Town and Country would need to meet the zoning code and comprehensive plan policies. We would treat it like any other application. It would be regulated by floor area requirements, parking requirements, et cetera, unless it went through some type of rezoning. As noted, there are comprehensive plan policies that encourage preservation of the existing retail use and shopping center. Like any potential project, it always, those are questions planners are asked every day, and it's always helpful to have some parameters. It's a lot easier to respond to something being proposed than expressing things completely hypothetically. But to that end, it would go through the same process as any other project.
But it is legitimate that they could put a parking ground below grade and on top of that, put an apartment building, say next to Trader Joe's?
Potentially, yes. Depending on what the existing floor area of the site is and whether there would, be sufficient floor area. But I think there could be potential to propose something.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
On that note, sorry, before we pivot away, on packet page 69, we're looking at sort of the site map, and Town and Country Village is predominantly, marked as the CC zone. But it is showing that, the highlighted property with the 2 parcels, all of these adjacent parcels, they're not owned by Town and Country, correct? They are leased by Town and Country to provide parking for Town and Country, and that it's only this large CC parcel that really is technically Town and Country, or am I misunderstanding that?
So all of the areas bounded by Encina, El Camino and Oregon, Embarcadero, are part of Town and Country, but each parcel is looked at individually in terms of floor area, lot coverage, everything. I think many of the parcels adjacent to this are owned by Town and Country, not just leased. These 2 parcels happen to have been in a long-term lease for many years, but are no longer being leased.
But for example, in that very corner of Encina and El Camino, there's that car wash, and that is not considered part of Town and Country, even though it's technically within the same island of land between these streets as they're defined.
It actually is theoretically part of Town and Country as defined by the zoning code and the comprehensive plan.
And would its operation as a car wash be at odds with any of the uses of Town and Country?
In our opinion, no. And I think that's really the argument that comes up here in the letter from LS Partners. It states that the residential use would be in conflict. And we spoke to this in the staff report and in the main body of the staff report, as well as an attachment. I think it's D. But in staff's opinion, the placing a residential use does not conflict with the continued operations of Town and Country.
Okay, thank you.
I have another hypothetical question. Sorry, Emily, you said you don't like hypothetical questions. But how is this different than, say, on University Avenue, housing above retail? There are truck noises doing deliveries. How is this housing next to retail versus housing on top of retail? How does that concern compare? And same with parking. There's parking on, you park on University Avenue if you're visiting somebody, or park in a nearby parking lot. So yes, you may park at Town and Country because it's nearby, but there's also Palo Alto Medical's garage that's right there. That's also free. You, like a visitor to these townhouses, could park at any of those places. I'm just trying to understand, like, we're trying to encourage mixed use stacked. This is like basically mixed use side by side. Do the same concerns about noise, about people parking in next door parking lot, is that the same?
I think those are very good points. I definitely think that that can be a basis of discussion for the board.
I would just add that with respect to noise, there are code requirements, building code requirements for interior residential uses that have to be met. And so as the applicant considers the design of their own project, they would need to ensure that they're taking into account, all the existing noise levels when making their determination of whether it meets building code requirements for noise on the interior.
On a different matter, I asked about the environmental review before. If you look at this streamlining for infill projects, there's a eligibility description, and it says qualified urban uses on at least 75% of the perimeter of the project. And such a infill project is immediately adjacent to qualified urban uses. Have you examined the qualified urban uses here, and you feel that they're going to pass that kind of criteria?
Yes, the CEQA definition of qualified urbanized use is pretty much any developed use. This property as a parking lot is considered an urban use. All of the surrounding buildings qualify as an urban use. To not be an urban use under CEQA, it pretty much needs to be a greenfield that's never been developed.
I would question that description as being qualified. A parking lot filled with cars is a qualified urban use. I don't think so. So to add to this, then if you looked at our comp plan, coordinated area plan to guide development in an area of Palo Alto where significant change is foreseeable, address both the land use and transportation, define the desired character and urban design traits, the area of the area. Identify opportunities for public open space, parks, residential opportunities, address currently connectivity to and compatibility with adjacent residential areas. This is an island in a parking lot, this project. So none of these possibilities really are possible here. I could see that if it were part of an urban design, this is a 1.3 acre lot, this whole piece. It's a significant amount of space. I could see it being developed as an appropriate urban relationship with other developments, but at this point, it's being developed with a parking lot. By itself, I don't think it's efficient. I don't think it's appropriate. It's an island. Now, we could talk about the aesthetics of it as well, but at this point, I'm more concerned that the environmental issues of the neighborhood are not conducive to housing at this moment.
I don't have a question, but I didn't really understand David's comment.
You didn't? I'm sorry, do you want me to restate it?
Yeah, but give me the overall point of view. Is you oppose or you support the project, and then tell me what the comment is.
No, I
Well,
don't support the project.
And as a caution, I would also say that we are still in the sort of the question and answer portion of this discussion. And I would encourage us to, if we have a question, we should be posing that. So if you have a question, David, let's direct that at
Well,
the
I
appropriate party.
did ask a question and Emily answered it for me. She said that she thought it would be considered an appropriate environment for this housing with a parking around it.
I'll go to a question.
Please.
This is for town and country development, if I may ask a question. In your various statements, it's been said that, you know, there's a letter from 2013 that basically zero housing would be what you would support. But then there's also letters and drawings from Mr. Randy Pop about, you know, 2 to 3 story development would be appropriate. I would like to understand, kind of similar to what Board Member Balte asked earlier, if you were designing this, what density, what size of housing, staying with housing, would you find appropriate? Is it 8 units with 8 parking spaces for guests? Like what would be your ideal?
I think in terms of the parking impacts, any project here should address the reality of parking behavior, not necessarily just the code requirements from our standpoint. And if we were going to design our own project here, as Peter suggested, to design the entire north lot, we would put the amount of parking that's needed for the residents of our new building and the residents visiting the building, in addition to maintaining the retail parking. So any project that had the appropriate amount of parking for reality, not just what the code says, because we all know that code doesn't necessarily reflect reality, is something that we would be supportive of. In terms of residential use here in general, we have, I'd say, evolved. Initially, as you mentioned, in 2013, we thought residential would not be appropriate here, but in conversations with the city on various levels, we're coming around to realizing that residential in the appropriate way could potentially work here. With that said, we do believe that the CEQA analysis and the zoning analysis is not appropriate and doesn't permit housing here without a change in the comp plan, which specifically says town and country should not be converted to residential uses. So with the appropriate zoning change and parking and buffers, we think that there could be, in terms of scale, the scale could change along this area. If you were closer to the railroad tracks, where we have 2-story buildings and fewer key view corridors, like between Pete's and CVS, that's a more sensitive view corridor that the applicant showed, where you're going to see from the central courtyard of town and country. But if you were building something further to the railroad tracks, maybe something 3 to 4 stories could be fine there. And as Randy mentioned, 2 to 3 stories is probably the max in this location.
On that note, before you step down, what are the operational hours of Town and Country Village?
My understanding, the beginning of the day, 4 o'clock in the morning, Palo Alto's trash trucks arrive, because we have deliveries that start at 6 or 7 in the morning, because many of our tenants open at 7 or 8 in the morning.
What time do they open to the public, where the
Open to
public
the public?
parking would be utilized?
Mitchell, is it 7 a.m.? Maybe. Staff at 7 and then open to the public at 10.
Open to the public at 10 o'clock, and that's when the predominant use case is of this parking lot, correct?
Except for our office
Staff,
tenants. We
understood.
have office tenants that come earlier
Understood.
for our second floor. And then people who are working at restaurants who get there 2 or 3 hours before breakfast time begins.
Understood. So staff predominantly using those parking spaces in the early morning hours. Okay, on that same note, do you guys allow overnight parking in Town and Country Village?
No.
So it is already prohibited. So if somebody was going to utilize this parking lot for their own use as one of their condominiums, they'd be towed anyway because they're not allowed to park overnight in Town and
So
Country Village.
towed by us.
Towed by you.
Not by the city, because the city doesn't police this. We would have to tow them and then
You would have
work
to be
with them.
forced to police them.
Which we do regularly now, but it
Mhm.
would be significantly exacerbated introducing a new property, a new project into the parking lot.
Okay, understood.
And I'll just
Thank you.
clarify, we don't own any of the land there. We have a
Lease agreement?
70+ year ground lease on all of Town and Country Village, except for these 2 parcels. We had been leasing those on an annual basis from the family that is in discussions and selling these to this current applicant.
Okay.
Make that
Thank you.
clarification.
To the board, are there any other questions at this time?
I have one more. This is really for planning staff. There's the notes on the package, and also I think one of the speakers mentioned something about a zoning violation with the fence that's there. Can you clarify that for us?
As I mentioned in my presentation, there is currently a fence surrounding these 2 lots. The initial fence had been put up without permission from the city. All fences on commercial properties require a minor staff level architectural review or sometimes a over-the-counter architectural staff review. After this was brought to our attention, we ensured that that they went through the process to get a permitted fence, and that fence is currently in place.
Okay, at this time, we'll close the discussion to questions and we'll turn it back over to the ARB just for internal discussions. Is there anyone that would like to kick us off?
Could I understand better than what the point David was trying to make earlier? 'Cause
Please
I
go
fully
for the full
respect Board
discussion.
Member Hirsch, and I
Yeah.
just want to really understand. I think what you were saying is that it's not an appropriate site for housing because there's adjacent parking lots on the same street. Is that right?
I hope to be saying more than that about this property, but initially that the property will be developed and it could remain a parking lot, and that the particular surrounding, I don't feel satisfies our comp plan requirements for an environment for housing. A parking lot is just inappropriate location to place a piece of a living dwelling place in the middle of a parking lot. So for me, there should really be a comprehensive planning for that whole site. And it should answer issues of the comp plan. And I don't see that that's been done in the process of application here.
But surely you're not saying a residential development next to a parking lot is inappropriate.
Well, yes, I am. So why not? Why
The
shouldn't I?
project just before this was next to a large parking lot.
What project?
Palo Alto Square has a very large surface parking lot directly adjacent to the project we just looked at.
Yes. Well, actually, there's a buffer in between the two.
So if there were some landscape buffering or some other design things that would make a difference?
Of course, that would make a difference.
I think what your real issue, David, is that you think this whole site should be developed as housing, perhaps.
Well, you know, intended.
But I'm trying to get you to come out and say that. That's what you think, and I want to hear it.
Yes, if you want me to state it that way, yes.
Because it
I
seems
think-
like a red herring argument to say that
No,
it
no,
shouldn't
I
be built
think
that
that
way
the-
just because of the parking lot next to it.
No, I think the site in this day and age, when we have a huge housing requirement to build in the city, that sites like this are ideal. We've talked about that in the past. And that this one ought to be some kind of an overlay district that allows some variation on the zoning to allow more larger amount of housing. There, without discussing the site planning of that housing, I think this would interrupt the possibility of creating a uniform design for this entire site as a special overlay district.
I can see that. Thanks. Okay, I understand now.
And David, for that point, I agree that it would be great if the entire Encina's Avenue was developed as housing, but that's not the project before us. And to, negatively comment on this project because you want more in the future does not really make sense to me. If this project is developed and built, and then in the future, whether it's town and country or they, whoever owns the land that they're leasing from in the future sells that, the parcels on that street to other developers who want to develop housing. It seems like, from what I understand, as long as the parking requirements per code is met, of course, would be nice to have more for guests and all, but we're also trying to move towards, especially close to, mass transit, that we don't want to encourage like massive amounts of parking more than what the code requires. Encina Street has street parking and Encina Avenue, I'm sorry. And there are other street parking nearby on El Camino and otherwise. So it seems like because we want more housing, to say this project should not go forward does not make sense to me.
To the extent that planning is a creative process, right? Just because this property happens to be a different kind of property than what is around it, doesn't mean that the city couldn't say that they would prefer to have an organized, unified design concept for the whole site that recognizes the shopping center and its entry and its design as well as a piece of this. And you create one significant design for the whole block. This is a large piece of property relative to other properties here. And it could allow for a significantly greater density of housing than 10 units. And this 10 units is really right in the middle and makes the development of the rest of the property very difficult.
Understood, but even then, based on the comments from Town and Country, for instance, they would at most support a 3-story building adjacent to their property, right? So if that entire street was 3-story housing, whoever owns it, that's besides the point. It's not going to get any denser than 10 units per whatever size this lot is, right? So if, the 7, 8 other lots here had 10 more per the same size, so let's just say there's 50 more units, 60 more units on that street. But that's not.
Let me respond to this. We just looked at a project that is 3.5 times the density of any other project in an MR 40 of the city, much greater density. And really, if we don't begin to have that kind of an attitude on major sites like this one, we will not meet the requirements of the
And a
housing element.
five-story development on this site came forward and got shot down, right? So it's not going to go to a 7-story or even a 5-story from here.
Don't judge that too quickly, because
no.
there are areas of that site that are closer to the railroad where you could have a denser construction, and it might not get shot down at all. It might be welcomed by the council and the city in general.
So I think part of the issue here is that I'm finding a little bit of sort of illogical line of thinking. If we want higher density housing, right, and totally agree with you on that, like, and again, totally agree that that should be, you know, potentially farther towards the train track side of things. But I think in the grand scheme of things, the Town and Country Village does not want any residential here. And by adding higher density residential, we're actually going to be exacerbating their issues to begin with. Their issues are that they are worried about being impacted by having to adjust their noise. They're worried about impacts of parking. In fact, this being a lower residential or lower density project significantly reduces those potential impacts, and they're still complaining, right? The 5-story was presented, there was complaints. It's been reduced to a 3-story, there's still complaints. It's only 10 units. So when you think about that, okay, how many potential, and 4 of the units have single car parking, the remaining 6 have 2-car parking. We're meeting, I mean, it's meeting everything. But the complaint is still that there's concerns that the parking will be taken over in the surrounding neighborhoods. Now, if you double the size of the density, you're going to double that potential issue of parking, right? You're going to double that potential issue of guest parking that's overflowing. So the answer really is to alleviate some of Town and Country's concern is to keep it less dense, right? So this is sort of the rock and the hard place that we're coming up between, is that I think in the grand scheme of things, it's just difficult for them to want to give up this amount of parking and to have any sort of impact. And while I understand that it would be setting a precedent of allowing residential on Town and Country's property, I do also feel that just these are separate parcels from this large CC lot. So when we're talking about potentially putting a parking structure in between the Trader Joe's and, you know, the remaining shops, it is a different situation. It's not the same as these actually different separate parcels with actual different separate entrances from Encina. So again, there's sort of a logical fallacy there where I don't think that that's really realistic in the same way that these ones could be. So the overarching question is, do we want residential in this area? And if so, what's the best way to get forward with doing that? And to alleviate the concerns of Town and Country, the answer is lower density, not higher density. And this is sort of the rock and the hard place we're against, because, you know, Palo Alto desperately needs higher density housing. And yet the parcel that we are presented with, the project that we are presented with, is what we have to evaluate. As much as I'd love to say, let's get this entire stretch of properties together and come up with a cohesive plan, we can't. It's outside our scope. We don't have that control. These are individually owned properties, and we are not the authority to make people do unified projects when they're separate parcels owned.
It's not our responsibility, I agree.
Right. So the question at hand is, given the parcel that we are being presented with, given its location, given its size and scope, do we think that this is an appropriate project? And then my one final comment, if I may, David, is that when we talk about it being next to a parking lot, yes, the reduced setbacks and everything, I do have pause and concern about that, and I will circle back to that later in our discussion. But in the grand scheme of things, this is right next to a shopping center. I mean, yes, it's next to a parking lot, but it's also right next to a shopping center. It's right next to train tracks. It's across the street from businesses, including an architecture firm. It's down the street from a car wash. There's so much happening here that it's not the same as thinking that like somebody's putting a townhouse allotment in a Walmart parking lot or a Costco parking lot. It really is very close to a lot of amenities. So the question to the board is, do we think that given the scope of what we're being presented, it's appropriate? Now, again, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know what's going to happen with Town and Country, but where it is, the size that it is, the scope that it is, what do we think?
So I'm willing to jump in on more of the architectural question, because I've felt several times looking at this that as much as I support housing and even higher density housing, I wanted the building to step back more from Town and Country. Town and Country is nothing if not a low slung development, 1-story, old looking stuff. And I've always thought that this should step back further at the back. Maybe not greater setback, but certainly above a certain level, keep pushing back on it. And I don't think the architect has done a whole lot on the back to try to really obviously match the town and country, and they clearly haven't stepped it back. But I've had a change of thought on this after spending some time, it was Tuesday morning out there, trying to really think to myself, what is it about the town and country? I know that place well from an architectural point of view, a construction point of view, the clay tiles, the heavy timber. What really struck me was I'll use the word messy urban vitality of the place. Just watching kids from the high school bike down the middle of the street, annoying cars, watching delivery trucks pull up, watching people jostle for a parking space, watching people really enjoy just sitting right on the curb, enjoying a cup of coffee. And what struck me is that that's what really defines town and country, is this messy urban vitality. And as I thought about it more, I think this building will just contribute to that. It'll make it better, make it more messy, more urban. There'll just be more people. And so, yeah, when I look at the building, it's taller than the rest of the stuff around it, and it's different. There's no question. It's messier. It works. And so I left that just thinking, this is great. We should do more of this kind of blend it together. The town and country is not really defined by its clay tile roofs or the timber posts. It's defined by the activity Palo Altans do on this site. And it's so well loved because people spend so much time there. You go there on the weekends, on a Saturday morning, it's like a parade almost sometimes. And I think having a housing development nearby is fantastic. And so I think in the end, it's a real win for town and country to have this happen. And so I'm coming to think that it's contextually compatible, not by the form of the building, but by the use of the building. That's my thought on the compatibility of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's the lifestyle that provided in this entire site. And also for this specific property, I think it's a good location for the housing. It's close to shopping, close to public transit, and also it has all the amenities nearby. And also for the proposed 3-story high, I think it's a good transition from the 1-story town country to across the street, because on the other side of the Encina, we see there are taller buildings behind the offices. If we see the renderings that provided the view from the town country looking towards the side, we can see there are taller buildings like the Palo Alto Medical Foundation structures that are popping up that is like 5-story or 4-story taller. So I think the proposed projects is a good transition and it's appropriate. And for this project, it could be just a start, and it could be a demonstration to see, to show how successful it would be. And maybe there are future development coming after people seeing how successful it is.
You know, the feeling that you're expressing about the liveliness, actually, a lot of that is because there's an indoor-outdoor relationship, and people are dining outside of restaurants. You know, there are, yes, they're next to cars, but there are also areas which are designated outdoor dining areas that make this, the liveliness of being next to a parking lot, not so bad at all. I'm not so sure that, well, that's really what a lot of what causes the life of it is exactly the outdoor relationship of all of these stores, so that the structure of the buildings actually extends out, and you're walking under pieces of the building. So there, you know, it's not that, you know, that where do you see that here? As a matter of fact, this is really a rather hard edge project. It doesn't have that kind of feeling whatsoever. But I'm not opposing it as a design because I think it is well designed. This project's well designed. I think that the parking issue in the interior of it, even though it's been studied with transportation input, I think is still pretty damn difficult, you know. It's a very tight space. It really needs another 5 or 6 space widths to it in order to be a really reasonable townhouse. You know, and we've been looking at a lot of townhouses, so we know that the space is 33 feet, you know, between buildings is a real requirement, you know, and backup spaces for cars that are pulling into the parking is really, really critical. So I think it's awfully tight and has been constricted by its own perimeter, you know, it's limited by that width. So it's been very hard to try to figure it out. And I'm not so sure that's really totally solved here. And as a design, I would like it in itself, you know, anywhere else. But I still think that at this point, unless there is an overall scheme for this site, all those rooms that face outward face parking. It's just an unfriendly environment for, when I first was in Cambridge area, I was next to a parking lot because I was renting and it was cheap. But here it is expensive and it's still next to a parking lot.
But David, the way it's planned, which I think addresses that, is that on the perimeter are stairs for each of the units. And the living areas are facing inward, which, you know, we want to think about it as a courtyard, but, you know, it's really a driveway for all of these units. But again, it's 10 units, probably, you know, I've lived in a townhouse, 2 cars, garage is plenty for a 2 to 3 bedroom house. And even if all of these people were leaving for work at, you know, between 8 and 8:10, it's a dozen cars, you know, like in terms of street traffic, congestion, there will be some amount of time where, you know, people have to wait. And how much does it impact the street? I don't know if there's been traffic studies to really clarify that, but really it's such a small development with such few cars. They're much denser townhouse developments with much larger kind of things all up and down the peninsula, which have pretty much the same restrictions, just multiplied many times. You know, so I feel like, you know, the width of that driveway, the inside the courtyard, that's very similar to back of townhouses in many developments up and down the peninsula. My most difficulty in terms of, you know, the drive width for these is really the last 2 units.
Yes.
With trying to, for that little tree at the end.
Absolutely.
I think it would be better if we forego that tree and get vine planting and get, you know, just wider garage doors for those single parking, single car garages would give you a lot more wiggle room to get in and out of that. But otherwise, I think it will be used as a, you know, kids learning to ride their bikes and all that good stuff in that small interior courtyard. And when the gate opens for people to come in and out, you know, you have to wait off to the side. It doesn't seem like unsurmountable to do that.
Yeah, I think my final comments here are that I do find this to be quite an introverted project. What I mean by that is really everything does focus on that interior courtyard. There's a lot of weight on that interior courtyard in terms of ingress, egress, deliveries, kids learning to ride their bikes, the way the bedrooms are all facing. Again, it's all sort of very inwardly focused with the exception of that top floor where you've got the corner units that are facing outwards. you know, in a perfect world, I'd almost wish that it would interact more with Town and Country, that it would have more ingress and egress towards Town and Country, that the walking path was somehow opened up more beautifully in that direction. But again, we're constrained by what we're constrained by. And in this regard, Town and Country Village has a building that will likely not move anytime soon. It has a drive aisle that will likely not move anytime soon. And based on those sort of confinements of the site, this feels appropriate. It feels like it's in a reasonable scale. It feels like it's being deferential to a certain extent towards Town and Country in terms of its scale. On a sort of nitpicky note, that rear elevation that's facing Town and Country, there is a block of it that is the same height as the lower side slope of the sloped roofs. So if you're looking at a 3.02, you can see there's the lower interstitial spaces that are with the white stucco, and they have a lower roof. So why is that back portion not lowered to that height as well? Again, kind of nitpicky, but again, everything we can do to sort of be deferential towards Town and Country, I think is important and well worth the look. So it's again, that last chunk that was sloped is now flat, and why can't it be brought down just a little bit lower to match the heights of those white stuccoed areas would be a question. I value Town and Country quite a bit. I've got a lot of sentimental memories from going to Palo Alto High School and spending many lunch breaks eating burritos from the old grocery store that used to be there where CVS is now. It is a very valuable space, and we want to treat it carefully. That being said, I don't think that it's fair to preclude any potential future development just because we want adequate parking for it. There are definitely different options. You know, if we're talking in long-range planning and what would be happening in an ideal world, that last space that's actually at the end of the Encina cul-de-sac towards the train tracks could be a 3-story parking garage for Town and Country, right? But that's, again, outside our scope. We can't require that. We can't insist on that. That is just something that at some point may or may not be developed. We're looking at a presentation in front of us today. It is for more housing in Palo Alto, which we are in desperate need of. It is taking over something that is basically being used to house, 27 cars right now, right? It's a parking lot, and it could be used to house families, which I think is a really important thing to note. I understand the concerns of Town and Country with the spillover. I would like for the city to sort of be able to provide a little bit more reassurance on that front. I don't know how that's possible, so I'm just, speaking in hypotheticals here, but I would like that a little bit more of that onus is on Palo Alto probably than Town and Country itself. But that being said, if anyone's parked there overnight, get them ticketed, get them towed. They're not supposed to be there. They shouldn't be there. Maybe there's something that could be worked out where Town and Country actually benefits, that they sell parking passes for overnight parking. So maybe there's some sort of process or service or arrangement that can be reached so that if they are going to be negatively impacted, they can sidestep it in a financially beneficial way to Town and Country to begin with. On that note, just going back to the architecture of the project, I think that I would like to say thank you to the applicant for their responses to our previous commentary. The lighting of the project is delightful. I think it's quite nice. It was a very heavy project and dark before, and I think that sort of lightening that up is a nice improvement. I appreciate the stair circulation actually being moved to the exterior. Like I said, it is a very introverted building, and some people will like that, some people will dislike that. It's sort of a personal preference, but I do like the activation of that front facade by having more windows that are facing the front that are less private, so that you are less likely to have curtains closed all the time, that you can see people moving throughout the space. I also do want to say that I think that being the first on the block is always the hardest, and that for what it's worth, this is big picture. This is a step in the right direction for housing in Palo Alto. And I think you've put together a very nice design for the space that you have. But it is hard. It's hard to be the first one out the gate to do it. If there was 3 other townhouse groups like this on the property, I don't think we'd be having this discussion right now. I think this would have been approved and moved along already, but you are the first, and you are sort of paving a path here, and that path needs to be tread carefully, especially being next to Town and Country. So that's my thoughts for the day. Appreciate your time and input. Appreciate the comments from Town and Country as well. This is a difficult one, but I'd like to make sure that everyone gets to say their piece, and then we will make a motion on this.
Are we doing a motion on this today? Okay. Yeah, just my final thoughts is, Hayes Group always, like, we always appreciate the designs you bring forward, and this is one of them. I really appreciate your taking our comments and responding to them with the, lightening of the colors, but still very, high quality materials. I think the way you've worked out all of the fire access is really thoughtful, and still keeping it, when I was looking at all the stairs and ladders and all, like, it is a very difficult challenge that you guys have solved, and in a very thoughtful way, and keeps the building, still looking really nice, and but really responding to the safety concerns there. Overall, and I think it's also, the side elevations are actually also improved without that fence, like being open to the sides that where the first responder access is, but the vine growth on it really warms that up. I do urge you to revise see if you can do a wider gate instead of that other door at those last two units in the back, so that the people parking there don't have to go back and forth 6 times. But yeah, I really appreciate the overall design, and thank you for bringing it forward, and for Town and Country as well. I know this is difficult, and like Chair Rosenberg was saying, I mean, it has to be a symbiotic relationship, right? Because it's, from what I understand, they are allowed to build housing here, and as other speakers have said today, it has to be financially feasible for them, but also not hurt the financial long-term of your property, like having to call towing and pay for that for any violations should not be on you. But that could be some ways that, you guys could work together on. If there are additional parking required, could that be a rental thing? And if not, like some restrictions on whoever buys these units, that, you're not allowed to park next door, either find street parking, or you don't have a third and a fourth car. I mean, these are, while they're expensive townhouses from the pricing that was listed here, it's not out of the ordinary for townhouses in this area. And so, and really appreciate the BMR units as well as a way to make Palo Alto affordable. And I think this project should move forward. Thank you.
Why don't you make a motion?
Well, I think we've all said our piece on it, but the staff is recommending we continue this to a date uncertain. And yet we've told them nothing about what to do for that. We haven't told them to change much of the design or the architecture. We've talked a lot about the use and issues that the Council and Planning Commission will look at. But why would it need to come back to us?
I was going to ask the same question of staff, like, is there any reason why you would want us to not vote on it today?
Yes.
So typically we wait until the CEQA analysis has been completed to ask for a formal recommendation. That has not been done yet, which is why we are asking for a continuation. If the board truly has no comments, we can document that. But we would prefer that it be continued for the purpose of CEQA.
Well, clearly the CEQA is important. These guys have been at this for over 2 years now, and it just looks terrible that we can't, we really don't have changes to the building that are that significant, and yet here we go again. I can think of one reason though why we should continue this, which is that all 5 of us sat with Architect Hayes and let him give us a spiel. Other members of the public didn't have that opportunity. However that may be, maybe they should. And that's something that's open to you to request, but it would seem to me to be fair to make sure that we've been open equally to everybody. So on that grounds alone, I would support continuing it, but I don't hear any changes that we're pushing for otherwise, I guess, to CEQA.
Yeah, I think that my only comment is that I would, appreciate just a second look at that very last podium and the height, and seeing if we can just bring that down a little bit more to be in alignment with sort of those white portions of the building. But sort of an off the cuff comment in terms of overall. Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly, Peter, that I think that, you know, we don't, as a board, seem to have a ton of comments on the architecture of this in particular. That being said, the CEQA still needs to be handled. I could feel like in another instance, maybe we could, you know, move it forward on the condition that CEQA, you know, if there's anything with CEQA related to architecture, we could come back. But in this case, because the other side has not necessarily had their opportunity to meet with board members, as the applicant side had, I would encourage the board to allow for that opportunity. So on that note, I'm going to make a motion that we continue to a date uncertain. Please, go ahead.
For Ken Hayes with Hayes Group Architects, KenHayes. So in the past, we have had projects that were moved along, and the requirement was that we work out with staff if there's any revisions that needed to be made. Because I mean, if we look at the calendar, when would we? Are we saying that we would come back after CEQA has been completed? Is there a way to say if CEQA is completed, that the support that we hear today would, you know, could be affirmed and staff could address any remaining comment with us? Because if we wait for CEQA, then what is the first step coming back here? Because you need to make a recommendation to a planning commission, right?
Yes, the ARB cannot make a recommendation without considering the findings of the environmental analysis. And we need to have that environmental analysis prepared, especially given comments that Ellis Partners has, so that all members of the public have the opportunity to review that before making a recommendation.
So really our only option today is to continue to a date uncertain.
Yes.
Okay. So then my motion stands. I'd like to continue to a date uncertain, but as expediently as possible. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We'll do a call for vote.
Board Member Adcock,
Yes.
Board Member Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch, Vice Chair Chen,
Yes.
Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. And again, thank you to the applicant. Thank you for the members of Town and Country for your input as well. To staff, we would like to make sure that, you know, little speed is put on this one with any sort of application or with the CEQA review. And then when this does come back, I would request that sort of we have a, you know, somewhat truncated review in terms of noting that ARB did not have comments from this hearing, and that what we are reviewing at that time would be the CEQA analysis and anything pertinent to that. Okay. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. And we're gonna try and roll right through the approval of our last two items, which is draft architectural review board meeting minutes for October 3rd, 2024. If there are any comments, speak now or forever hold your peace.
One minor adjustment on packet page 117. The lower part of it, start with Vice Chair Chen remarked the assumed all building heights. So the last sentence here, she asked for CC2 if they could still consider 60. It should be 60 foot high instead of 6. We're talking about the building height here, so it should be 60 instead of 6.
On packet page 117, 6th paragraph down, that begins with Vice Chair Chen remarked that assumed that all the building had a flat roof. So the comment is about that last sentence. She had asked for CC2 if they would still consider it 6 feet high enough, and it's supposed to be 60, SIXTY.
Noted. Thank you.
I have a comment. Wonder if we could fill in the blanks here. There's some words used like female answered.
Which packet page?
On page 113, packet page 113. Female answered, or again on 122, female thought.
How do they know it's a female?
Anybody called female? There are
That's
three
sort of
females here.
inappropriate,
Does it?
Peter, are we having that conversation now? That is beyond the purview of ARB. Thank
Maybe
you
we
very
should say
much.
a person said this.
For what it's worth, I would like to get that person's name if possible. And if it's an unknown name, then yes.
And then on page
Sorry,
124.
David, is that really onerous on you guys, Veronica? Because I know there's a transcription service and I've noticed this in various meeting minutes where if they couldn't catch who it was, it says female or male said XYZ. I don't want to make it super onerous on you guys to try to find who that female is, but.
Let's also make sure it's not Yumi or Yingshi, right?
Yeah.
So if it's one of us, please let us know. And if it's a public speaker, then the name wasn't caught, then that's a
But
different
it is,
conversation.
it is substantially inappropriate to identify the sex when you don't know who the person is.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, a person
my
said,
point.
or, I think if it's not too much
Yeah.
on
just-
staff, if it's one of us to have named, or if it's a.
Or it should just be unnamed person.
Unnamed person, yeah.
Yeah, we can rewatch, and if it's one of the members of the board, we'll fill it in, and then if not, it's
Just
unnamed or
Unnamed, yeah.
person from the public, yeah.
Okay. Okay, on that note, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes with those adjustments. The first one, this is only for October 3rd, 2024.
Second,
Thank you.
Board Member Adcock,
Yes.
Board Member Bolte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chen,
yes.
Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to the approval of minutes for October 17th, 2024. Do I have any comments from the board? Okay. Final call. All right, I make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second,
Thank you.
Board Member Adcock,
yes.
Board Member Bolte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch, Vice Chair Chen,
Yes.
Chair Rosenberg.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, any final board member questions, comments, announcements? I think Stephen? Nope.
At the beginning of the meeting, we talked about the cell phone tower.
Correct.
I made some comments at the city council meeting. But we're all aware of what the outcome of that was. So no-
Yeah, and
nothing
this
else
is
there.
partially to the work plan that was presented by myself and Stephen to, with tremendous support by staff, to the city council, and that basically our work plan was approved for the future year, and that the one item that was added was the review of the cell phone towers. So they wanted us to add that to our work plan. Now, how that's defined and in what capacity, we don't know yet. Just that it was added as part of what they would hope to see out of us in 2025. I do appreciate your and David's comments that we have reviewed this as an ARB before. That was before my time, I believe before Yingshi and Board Member Adcock's time as well. And I would like to review what was done previously by the ARB when those do finally hit our desks, whether it's 2 weeks from now or 6 months from now. So.
Yes, it's possible to get what the detail of what we had presented. We worked quite diligently on the spacing of the items on the poles.
These are ones that look like
Dimension
fake trees.
And perimeter as well,
Okay,
you know,
just
and an organization of the interconnections of pieces within it, which have to relate to each other.
Yeah,
And
so
the
what-
dimension from the ground up to the base of anything that's put on a pole.
Right.
So it would be very useful for us to have that.
That'd be an excellent starting point for when these do cross our desk. Okay, in the meantime, if there's nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.